Hey everyone, if you're enjoying my RM audiobooks, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit that hype, and maybe check out my Patreon if you want to support the channel even more. Your support means a lot and helps me keep these coming. Now, sit back and enjoy the story.
Halo. No, I have horns. Warning. Doomslayer will be nerfed in some situations for the plot. You have been warned. Chapter 1. Hell couldn't handle it. Not anymore. It was too powerful. The thing knows as the Doomslayer had just sealed the well after tearing Hell's army limb from limb once again. It must have lost several hundred of its forces, not to mention the champions and guardians that were also destroyed by it. For only a moment, it was gone till it was thrown back into bowels of hell once more. They fought it, all of them together, but he still tore and ripped apart hundreds. The only reason they managed to stop him is because he ran out of ammo. Even then it used its bare hands. They sealed him once more, in hopes that this would hold him for much longer. They used their powers to send it adrift, beyond the realm off the red planet, and beyond the realm of this solar system. Yet they would not leave Hell. For by the time they were next able, others that appeared like the Doomslayer arrived. No, they needed to wait till they could meet something that could give them the edge that they needed. They continued to elude Cortana's rage. Her idea that artificial intelligence was superior to all life, and thus must rule, it was terrorizing. She had already taken out dozens of human military bases. What made this worse is the fact that the Covenant was using this to push on humanity from the other side, as what little remained of them seemed to be gaining strength. How this was possible was beyond confusing. How is everything? Captain Thomas Lasky said, stepping onto the bridge. The man that controlled the warp turned to him. As you know, sir, Infinity was designed to be able to run for literal years. So we're good. It's more of a metal game now, he stated. Another called over. But we've got Dr. Halsey, several current generation Spartans, and the 4 Spartans that managed to survive Reach. Not to mention the man that destroyed all the Halo rings and defeat the Didact. We've got this, the person said, turning back to their screen. A loud thud echoed. Still, we're one ship. Don't matter how big. Captain, Roland called up, his yellow figure appearing on the main control desk. We have to stay positive, Captain Thomas said to them. Cortana won't attack this ship. I can promise you that. Captain, Roland called again. The captain turned to the AI. Yes, he asked. The figure pointed to the glass. A large metal container was pressed up against it. I've got strange readings, but I can tell you for sure, something in there is alive, Roland said. Captain Thomas scratched his head. All right, send some people out to grab it and bring it to Dr. Halsey. Extreme caution. 4 Marines grabbed the container and brought it down into the labs that Dr. Halsey was using. She looked at it and found it to be covered in markings that she had never seen before. Also, it had a chair around it that was comprised of a metal comparable to that of titanium. Each link was nearly half an inch thick. But it was odd. It wasn't really uniform. Like whatever made this put it on out of fear that the rest wasn't enough. She got plasma cutters and torches and began to open it up. But for some strange reason, it was a lot harder than it should have been. Like a different force was pushing back at her tools. When she busted it open after nearly 2 hours, what she found inside was something that was beyond strange. An armored suit, roughly 6'3" and with an old design of a space marine. She grabbed a scanner and looked at what it was comprised of. What it showed was amazing. Base metal was of course titanium, making this suit with the 300 to 400 pound range with 4 different other metals. But that wasn't what was amazing. That was the fact that it had an unknown element coursing through it. And there was a body inside. She began to have machines remove the suit till only a man with a very old militarized haircut and enough scars to cover 10 men was left. She set the armor up off to the side and went over to the body with a needle. All right, let's get to work. She pricked his skin with the needle. His arm flew up and grabbed her by the chin, and he sat up and glared at her with a growl. He then picked her up with one arm and tossed her 10 feet away from himself. Get on the ground, a Marine said, pointing a taser at him. The man grabbed the needle off the table he was set, and the Marine tossed him. The man grunted and turned around and threw the needle into the Marine's face. It pierced his cheek. The Marine let out a scream as the man ran at him, swept his legs out from under him, and slammed his body into the floor. Another Marine ran up behind him, and he ducked under a punch before slamming his own into the guy's face before grabbing his arm and pushing it down so he could slam his knee into the Marine's chest. A Marine ran up behind him, and he threw the first Marine into him. He took a breath, and a Marine ran up behind him and hooked his arms under the man's as another ran up to punch him. With a grunt, he brought up his feet and slammed them into the Marine with such force that he went flying 7 feet, while throwing himself and the Marine holding him backwards. They crashed onto the ground as the Marine lost his footing. The man rolled back off him and slammed a fist into his chest before putting one into his face, knocking him out. A Marine ran up and the man slammed a bare foot into his stomach, so he doubled over. They wrapped his arm around the Marine's body and flipped him upside down before slamming his back into the floor. Another Marine ran at him, and he returned the favor. He hit him with a close line and slammed the back of his head into the ground as he pulled him down. A Marine that had a broken nose grabbed his walkie-talkie. He spat out a tooth. We need a big guy, over, he said before passing out again. The last Marine in the room got an elbow planted across his face as he hit the ground. The doors to the lab opened, and a man that stood just above 7 feet tall was there. "Okay, calm down before I have to hurt you," Carlo Hoya stated. The man lowered his arm to his other and placed a fist within his other hand. With a simple crack of his knuckles, Carlo knew this guy wasn't going to just give up easy. Carlo began to run at him. The man returned the favor. Carlo punched down, and the man dodged and landed a punch to Carlo's stomach before jumping to the side and punching him in the kidney. Carlo swung wide at him, and the guy jumped back. Carlo reached out and knocked him to the side with a punch. The guy wobbled a little and shook his head as Carlo came back him and gritted his teeth. He jumped up and wrapped an arm around Carlo's head and began to elbow it over and over again before slamming a knee into his jaw. Carlo grabbed and threw him into the metal med table, the metal bending behind the force. "Fucking asshole." The man grabbed a scalpel and ran at the Spartan once more. He stabbed the medical tool into his thigh. Carlo bent down slightly, and the man punched him in the face twice before Carlo punched him back. The man rubbed his face and found that his nose was bleeding as Carlo yanked the scalpel out from his thigh. He ran at Carlo and hit him with a double drop kick to knock him back before running and punching him into the wound on his leg. Carlo punched him back a bit as he was on one knee. The man staggered but grabbed Carlo's arm and threw him slightly while holding onto his arm, so it was now up with his shoulder while Carlo was on his back. The man kicked Carlo in the side of the head before using his weight and muscles to break Carlo's arm. He jumped onto Carlo as he let out a scream and began to punch him in the face over and over again before Carlo shoved him off and kicked him the chest back 10 feet. "Fuck," Carlo said, holding on his arm as it was both broken and dislocated. The man got up and spat off to the side with his saliva mixed with his blood. Carlo got up and regretted as his thigh was still bleeding badly. He hit the artery, and something told Carlo that it wasn't accidental. 3 Marines came up behind the man and hit him with 3 tasers. He gritted his teeth and wrapped his arm around the 3 wires and yanked the guns out of their hands. He ran at them, but 2 more hit him. A needle was launched into his arm. They let up the tasers. As they did, he ran at the 3 that tossed him first and knocked one to the ground with a flying knee before blocking a punch from another and knocking him to the ground before the tasers started up again as another needle was shot into him. He was brought to his knee and a Marine punched him across the face but found his finger in the man's teeth. The man bit down and ripped it off with his teeth. The Marine fell back with a scream as another taser hit the man. Even with all that, it still took the man a moment to collapse. "Damn," one of the Marines stated. "Dr. Halsey, tell me what or who we're dealing with," Captain Thomas Lasky asked as the Master Chief walked with him in his armor. They were in the holding cells, normally used for Covenant prisoners, but now there was something even more dangerous. They walked up to a metal cell with a force field blocking the entrance with the man on his knees on the floor and his hands shackled. "Is he grunting?" "He does that when he thinks. Dr. Halsey, he doesn't seem to like to think. More of an action person. Like you." She nodded to Master Chief. "So he doesn't talk?" the captain stated. "Is he a mute?" "Not that our scans can tell. More along the line of he doesn't like to talk," she stated. "Also, I was able to test his blood once we sedated him, and I got my shoulder put back into place. I found that he has at least 4 different drugs and elements coursing through him, giving him extreme strength, almost to that of a Spartan." "Elements?" Master Chief questioned. "What do you mean?" "Exactly that. An element that we only have trace amounts of, lost nearly 3.5 centuries ago. His body seems to contain it to a degree, like he's been exposed to the heart of it." She then picked up a vial with his blood in it and sloshed it around for a moment. "Also, this is some scary stuff. It has at least 4 different drugs in it, all of them boosting his strength, endurance, and reaction speed to levels just shy of a Spartan's." "So what is he?" Master Chef asked. "He looks human. The armor he wore is beat up so much we can only get a few markings off it that actually mean sense," Roland said, popping up next to them, and a hologram of the armor appeared next to him. "Only one on it actually match anything in our database." "UAC? The UAC?" Captain Lasky questioned. "Wasn't that a branch of the UNSC?" "More of like its predecessor," Dr. Halsey said. "I actually used a few of their ideas when creating the Spartan program, especially the idea of the ultimate Marine." "So this guy was one of them?" Captain Lasky said, looking over at the man as he glared back. "The only one, Captain," she answered. "It was just an idea, at best an experiment. Somehow, though, this guy became this ultimate Marine. But that still doesn't explain how he's alive. Not even close how he's here. Then again, most of the UAC was secretive." "What are these weapons?" Master Chef said, picking up a double-barrel shotgun off a long table that was practically covered in weapons. The man in the cage glared at him. Master Chef set it down, and the man returned his eyes to the floor. "His," Dr. Halsey stated. She gestured to a small iron box. "A warp pack. Was an idea we had a while back, allowing for Sodders to carry a great deal more weapons and ammo with him." Captain Lasky picked it up and opened it up to see a whirling purple energy. "Problem is that there is a constant possibility of it rupturing and destroying everything in a 6-meter radius," Dr. Halsey said almost sarcastically. The captain set it down and took a few big steps away from it. Can't risk scanning it for that reason. There are 10 guns here, Master Chef stated. Who needs an arsenal like this? Apparently him. The captain said, then looked at Dr. Halsey. Let me talk to him. See if I can get him talking. Good luck, Captain. Last guy who went in there got the skin on his nose ripped off when that guy bite him. Dr. Halsey said. You fixed since then, right? He asked as he went to the cell and put his hand over the scanner. Dr. Halsey shrugged. He took a deep breath and opened it up, and as he did, everyone in the room aimed at the man that was currently being held down by his restraints. He looked up at Captain Lasky as he held his hands behind his back. Hello, I am the captain of the Infinity, the vessel you are currently being held on. He told the man. You hurt a good number of my men, but I'm willing to take it as a shock reaction. A lot of soldiers have that happen once waking up from a trauma. Silence. Don't like talking. All right, yes or no questions then. The captain said as the man continued to glare at him. Is that okay? Silent. Not even a single motion from his head. Come on, work with me here, Dash. As he said this, alarms went off. Roland, what is going on? 5 Covenant battle cruisers. The AI answered. Several bordering parties have already hit our ship. Return fire and start sending troops to the breaches. The captain said, turning away from the man. The man grabbed him with a hand that was partially dislocated as he had popped it out of the shackles. Blood dripped from the skinned parts of his wrists. Lasky felt himself getting yanked down and forced to open the shackle around his other hand with his clearance pass. The man put him in a headlock as the other soldiers got ready to shoot. Don't, Thomas Lasky called out. Okay, man, you've got 3 options right now. Let me go and we use plasma shackles next time. Don't let me go and wait for that Spartan to blow your head off your shoulders with that pistol. Is that permission, sir? Master Chef said, pointing a magnum at the man's head. Even from 20 feet away and such a small window, it wouldn't be an issue. Only if he doesn't let me go, he stated. The last option is that you let me go and help us. I give you your weapons and you fight with us. You do that and we can figure out exactly what you want. You have 20 seconds. The man grunted and glared at Master Chef. 10 seconds passed and he nodded his head. He let go of the captain and he unlocked his legs. The guns remained trained on the man as he got up and walked out. He fixed his wrist and went to the table covered with his weapons and began to put them back inside. His armor was off to the side, and so he put it on. While wearing the suit, he cracked his knuckles. You're out of ammo, the captain said as the man pulled his pistol out of the warp pack. So for now, I think you're going to have to survive off that pistol and guns you pick off the ground till we get your custom ammo made in the armory. The man stared back at the captain, and the captain took a step back. Come on, a sergeant said, walking past the man. You're with us. A few Marines followed, and the man seemed to shrug and followed. Killing was killing after all. Chapter 2. The man walked only a few feet in front of the other Marines as he was not allowed to leave the scope of their rifles. He didn't seem to care that they didn't trust them, for he showed no sign of anger no matter what insults or threats they threw at him. The sound of plasma and gun fire echoed as they got closer and closer to the action. All right, double time, the commander said. His men began to run down the corridor and watched in surprise as the man ran over 3 times their speed. Hey, the commander called after the man as he ran to the barricades that the other Marines were using as cover. He jumped over it as he charged up a shot from his pistol and shot a grunt in the face and crashing into it. He aimed his pistol to the side while moving around and shot a grunt several times, blowing off pieces of its flesh before running into it and kicking its leg and having it snap. As it cried out, he punched it in the head with such force that it exploded. He shot another several times and blew off its head. He continued to run and jump around them while firing. He charged up a shot and blew another grunt's head off. A grunt threw a sticky grenade at him, and he moved to the side so it stuck to the wall instead. It exploded as he watched. He ran at the closest grunt as he blasted it over and over again. As its corpse fell, he grabbed a sticky grenade off its body and pressed the button to turn it on. He reached a jackal and stuck it onto its arm before kicking its shield with such force that it was sent back into a group of grunts. It exploded and he ran to a group of stacked crates and jumped up into the catwalk where jackal snipers were. He shot the first one a few times before knocking it down and stomping its face in. The man picked up the repeater as he put the pistol into his warp pack. He fired into the 2 other jackals before jumping off and landing onto a grunt and breaking its skull in. He picked up its needle gun and used the spikes as they stuck out the back to stab the jackal to his left through its jaw. He pulled it out and shot at an elite as it shot back at him. But he never stopped moving, so he got a clip into the elite without taking any more than 10 shots. The elite exploded and the man looked examine the gun before tossing it to the side and picking up the elite's storm rifle. He shot rapidly into a group of shield jackals and took down one of their shields. He ran at it with a charged pistol and blew a hole through its neck. As it hit the ground, he pulled out the storm rifle once more and knocked the next one's shield to the side before shoving it into its gut and pulling the trigger as he brought the gun's barrel over its entire body. The last one shot him 3 times as he destroyed its shield, and while it was stunned, he knocked it to the ground, grabbed its face, and smashed its skull into the floor. A body of a dead Marine was behind it. He held a shotgun, so the man tossed the storm rifle to the side and grabbed it. He held the pump as he pressed the stock to the wall and pumped it that way. An elite with an energy rifle shot at him while hoping to side. The man rushed him, firing over and over again till its shields were down. The elite roared, and he blew off one of its knees at the kneecap. As it fell, he punched it across the head twice with such force that it nearly exploded. A tube of green energy was launched at him, and he moved just out of the way so it passed right in front of his chest. He turned his head sharply and saw two grunts standing side by side, one holding a large yellow gun on its shoulder. He pumped the shotgun. The grunt with the launcher tossed it to the grunt next to him and pointed. He ran over and double jumped over them, killing one with a shot from the shotgun and the other with his feet and fists. He picked up the launcher and shot up at the other catwalk 2 times and killed the 5 jackal snipers up there. He tossed it to the side and lifted up his shotgun again. He turned around sharply and fired at a cloaked elite. This brought him out of cloak as it swiped its energy sword at the man. His shotgun was cut in half before he was kicked back into the wall where a busted pipe was sticking out. Impressive, the elite said, coming over. Your death shall be quick. The man shook his head sharply and looked at the busted pipe. He pulled out his pistol and began to shoot at the elite with a few charged shots. This sped up the elite's approach, and as he was 5 feet from the man, he put his pistol away and pulled the pipe further out in front of him and slid his armored arm over it to make sparks, igniting the gas coming out of the pipe. Oh, the elite realized as flames overtook him. He screamed as his flesh burned, and after roughly 7 seconds the man clenched the pipe hard with one hand to cut it off. The flames died off as he walked up to the nearly dead elite with a charged pistol and blew off its head. The Marines that came with him there slowly walked up and stared at the destruction the man had just caused. One of them stepped up with his rifle extended to him. The man took it with a nod before turning back to the corridor and walking once more. What are you doing? The commander demanded, giving him a weapon outside of combat. He can do more good with it than I can, the Marine answered. Besides, I don't really think he would need a rifle to kill us. Master Chef walked through a small corridor, shooting left into every Covenant that he saw, his rifle only firing when he was sure the bullets would hit their target. An elite fired at him, and he took cover. He heard the activation of a plasma grenade and came out of cover as it was thrown and shot it midway between him and the elite that threw it. He kicked the small metal crate to his left into the elite's legs. The elite fell on top of it, and he broke its neck with the stock of his rifle as he reloaded. With his other hand, he pulled out his magnum and shot a jackal's hand, and while it reeled back in pain, he shot it with his rifle. He attached the pistol to his side as he continued forward. Grunts began to run from him, screaming demon, while 2 elites fired back at him. His shield absorbed most of the damage as he fired back. When their shields went down, he pulled out the magnum once more and took them both down with headshots. He put away the magnum and pulled up his rifle as he reloaded and took down 2 more grunts. 3 jackals with shields began to fire their needlers or plasma pistols at him, and he threw a frag behind them. They turned their shield to it, and he blew away 2 of them with rifle fire. The grenade exploded and destroyed the last one's shield as Master Chef took it down with an assassination. A grunt that activated 2 plasma grenades rushed him. He used an armor lock and took the explosion. As he came out of it, an elite with a plasma sword swung at him. Master Chef dodged and hit the elite with an uppercut and dodged the next swipe with a slight hop back as he pulled up his magnum and fired 3 times into the elite's face. This did not break its shields as it tried to tackle him. Master Chef fell backwards as he put his feet into the elite's stomach and threw it into the wall with a push of his legs. It got up and rushed him again as he unloaded his rifle into it. This broke through the elite's shields, and it hit the ground 2 feet shy of Chief. 3 more elites and several grunts came at him. He kicked up the plasma sword and turned it on. He rushed the first elite and cut it down and stabbed it through the next one's chest as the blade ran out of power. He shot a grunt with his rifle as he took cover once more. The elite came around, and Chief came up and pushed the elite's gun upwards as he put the barrel of the magnum under the elite's chin and pulled the trigger 3 times to kill it. Chief yanked the gun out of the elite's hands and used it to take down the remaining 2 grunts. He pulled his rifle over his shoulder and reloaded it. This area is clear, Chief called over the comms, moving on to the next area. Man, Spartans are crazy, a Marine said as they followed the Master Chief. The Marine next to him nodded. Master Chief, is your area clear? Captain Lasky asked through the comms. Yes, sir. Nice work. The Covenant ships seem to be falling back. Head to the armory. It would be safer for you to escort that strange Marine to the bridge. Dr. Halsey is also down there doing some scans on the man. On my way, Chief answered. When he arrived in the armory, he saw the strange Marine with both his arms covered in blood and his torso dripping with it. The 2 Marines that had their guns pointed at his back and head seemed almost scared, even though all he was doing is holding a shotgun shell, not even a shotgun. He reached into his warp pack and pulled out a pump-action shotgun and began to load it. That model looked like it could hold roughly 10 to maybe 20 12-gauge shots. He loaded one after another and reached 20 and then kept going. Master Chief watched as he loaded another 10 into it, then another 10, then another, and then another. Only then did he pump it and put it back into his warp pack. He pulled out a heavy assault rifle and grabbed a belt of 30 and loaded it in. The man then continued to add 6 more before putting it away. How is that possible? Master Chief said, coming over to Captain Lasky and Dr. Halsey. Through the same technology that allows him to carry all those weapons at once. Made by the strange element that his armor contains to a degree, Dr. Halsey said as he started loading a rocket launcher. It's impressive, his technology, almost as impressive as his fighting capabilities. After a few minutes of him reloading his weapons, he walked over with enough firepower in his warp pack to take down several plutons and the companies that they were part of. But all he did was cross his arms and seemed to look up at Master Chief for a moment before he gave a slight shrug. Dr. Halsey scanned the man with a device and gestured for the two of them to leave. The man walked in front of Master Chief as Master Chef held onto his assault rifle. Neither one of the soldiers said a word as the sound of their metal feet clanking against the ground. They got to the bridge after maybe half an hour of walking and taking lifts. It was a huge ship. Captain Lasky was waiting for them as he talked to Roland. Master Chief, thank you for your efforts in fighting off the Covenant. Lasky told him. Thank you, sir. He replied with a nod. The man did not seem to care. Well, despite our best efforts, they still managed to damage our warp drive. Lasky stated. Roland, how long is that going to take to repair? A week at most. Roland said, his yellow form appearing. Can't repair it here, though. We could set the ship down on one of these planets. I recommend that one. The map of the solar system focused on a planet that was mostly barren, with only a handful of areas across the planet seeming to support life. Is it safe? Lasky asked. Best place to land. Out of the 3 other planets in this system, one has a thunderstorm covering the entire planet that would destroy half of our systems just on approach from the level of power it's shooting out. Acid rain on the other. And the other, by what I can tell, is like a frying pan. Roland said, crossing his arms. So yeah, it's safe in hindsight. The Covenant will be there. Lasky said. Chief, I'll be relying on the Spartan teams to protect the Infinity as we make the repairs. Understood, sir. Master Chief answered. Also, I shall place this man under the supervision of Blue Team once we land until we secure the area. The captain continued. Will that be a problem? The man said nothing and rolled one of his shoulders. I'm hoping that is a no. Captain Lasky, we'll be landing within the next 2 hours. So, Chief, get your team set up. Sir, what should we call this man? Simply man would not work out in the field. Master Chief asked. A Marine in the corner chuckled and called out. Why not Ripper? The way he ripped and tore through the Covenants with practically his bare hands it would fit. The Marine said as he had seen the footage of him ripping apart several jackals and grunts. The man looked at him and he seized up. The man simply gave a single nod before turning back to the captain. All right, let's go with that for now anyway. Lasky said. Dismissed. Chapter 3. So this is the guy that took out one of the new generation Spartans? Linda asked as Chief and the man walked onto the Pelican. The man held his pump-action shotgun with a sort of twitch that simply said that he didn't like holding it when he wasn't allowed to shoot. How soft did they make the program? Still not an easy feat for a normal person. Frederick observed. Heard he doesn't talk much. No, he doesn't. I don't think he's uttered a single word since waking up. Master Chief informed them. You all know the plan? Scout and secure. Pretty basic. Kelly said, stepping on. The man, now codenamed Ripper, sat down and strapped himself in, but did not allow the bar to lower itself. He rested his shotgun in the seat next to him while holding onto the fore end, and since he sat in the very corner, no one was going to sit next to him. Well, isn't he cheery? His codename is Ripper. Master Chief told them while going to the cockpit and tapping on the glass of the door. All members of Blue Team accounted for. Thanks, Spartan. The captain called back and started up the engine. Kick some ass for me, would ya? Affirmative. Frederick called to the front. The man in the corner curled and uncurled his fingers around his shotgun. He did not like the way they were talking. Not enough talking about killing for his taste. He jerked his neck to the side a bit, and the sound of his cracking neck turned the heads of each member of the Blue Team. He then did it for the other side just to make sure they knew how little of a shit he gave. The Pelican came to a stop about 20 feet off the ground, and the back door opened up. The man stood up and walked up behind the Spartans. Frederick looked down at him as he walked up and held out his arm slightly. Need a lift? He asked. The man knocked away his arm and jumped out of the Pelican. Frederick looked over at John, who simply shrugged. They jumped out after him, compressing the rocky ground around their feet as the thousands of pounds of metal slammed into the planet. The man looked back behind him as they landed and waited for them to pull their feet out of the small indents that they had created for themselves. Linda checked the monitors in her helmet. 120 degrees. Hot, Linda said. The man's body jerked for a little bit before slowly shaking his head. If the Spartans hadn't known better, they would have sworn that he was laughing inside that helmet of his. All right, we go 6.5 clicks north from here, deeper into the woods. Thermal picked up movement around there along with a sort of encampment. John said with a gesture. From there we eliminate the enemy and scout 2 clicks in all directions from that position before getting another location. Let's head out. Can he keep up? Kelly asked. The man looked at her and he almost seemed to sigh. If he can't, we'll slow down. John answered. Come on. They began to run. Even though they were practically wearing tanks, the Spartans could easily match the best Marine sprinter, with the majority of them being able to run between 25 to 30 miles per hour. Currently, they ran at roughly 20 to make it easier on the man that they were in charge of overseeing. But even after 5 minutes of that speed, a speed that most would consider a high level of sprinting, the man remained right beside them. So they kicked it up a bit, going up to 25 miles per hour. A few minutes after that, and he remained right next to them. Kelly began to get slightly annoyed because of this and actually began to run even faster than the rest of the group. The man sped up as well and ran next to her. She was running over 30 miles per hour, and yet he seemed not to even care how fast she was. Even when they began to leave the rest of Blue Team behind, he kept up with her. She went as fast as she could and looked over and found him keeping pace. How could a non-Spartan run 40 miles per hour? Even then, she was the fastest of all the Spartans. She stopped almost immediately as she saw the convenient encampment just ahead, her boots digging into the dirt. Her shoulders rose and fell. He, on the other hand, didn't even seem winded. He looked ahead and dropped his shotgun into his warp pack and pulled out his assault rifle, a machine gun that most men would never be able to even fire with any sense of control. As the rest of the Blue Team arrived, he reached back into the warp pack and pulled out a scope and slid it on top of the rifle. "Why did you run ahead?" John nearly demanded. "Sorry, got a bit excited, I guess," she said, looking over at the man who was scoping out the group of aliens. After counting it, there was a little more than 20 that he could see, and guessing there was 3 times that in total, he seemed slightly disappointed. "Plan. By the looks of it, a flanking strategy would work best," John said. "Kelly, you attack from the side." "Guys," Frederick started. "Linda, cover fire with Ripper." "Guys," Frederick said, now slightly angry. "Frederick, you're with me up the middle." John turned to Frederick. "What? He's gone." All the Spartans turned and stared down at the spot where the man once was. "Oh, you've got to be kidding me," Kelly hissed. They then heard gunfire up ahead and off to the side. They looked out over there and found the man taking on the entire group by himself. He ran in from the side, shooting down grunts as he went. One grunt turned to run, and he ran up to it to rip off its methane pack and threw it into a group of 3 jackals before shooting the grunt with an explosion. He tossed a grenade towards a brute. The brute stopped and covered its face. The man looked down the scope and shot the hand off of a jackal as it hid behind a shield. As it screamed, he blew off its head before taking off the scope and sliding an attachment to the front of the rifle. The grenade exploded, and the man jumped at the brute as its shields lowered while shooting a rocket from the rifle into it. He turned away from it and sent the rest into another brute. The rockets exploded, and the first brute found its head ripped in half by the explosion, while the other had its shield lowered and was bleeding across its torso. It roared at the man, ran up to it, knocked it down, grabbed its leg, broke it backwards, and forced it to cave its own face it with its foot, all within the matter of 3 seconds. A carbine shot knocked back his shoulder, and he looked up at a perch. The jackal looked down and gulped and began to unload the clip. The bolts bounced off his armor as he jumped up several feet before the rockets went off on his legs, and he pulled himself onto the perch. He grabbed the jackal by the head and smashed it on the tree. He reattached the scope while jumping off it and shot into a group of grunts. "He doesn't like to stand still, does he?" Frederick asked. "So the Spartans didn't get weaker? That's good to know," Linda said, looking down her scopes and pulling the trigger twice. An elite had his head blown off, while a grunt running for a turret was also taken down. "Grunt?" John asked. "Not telling," Linda said. Frederick jogged forward as a brute jumped out from the side while shooting a spike launcher. Frederick ran up to it while unloading his battle rifle into it. He knocked down its shields before swinging his rifle and knocking it to the ground before stomping on its head. Kelly ran out from the opposite direction and shotgunned down 2 grunts before running at a jackal while dodging plasma shots from its pistol. When she reached it a second later, she jumped over its shield while shooting down to kill it. Master Chief walked forward while unloading his clip into each and every Covenant soldier that was out of cover. An elite with an energy sword rushed him, and he brought up his arm as a block while he sent his armor into locked mode. This stunned the elite and found his stomach filled with a clip from the chef's rifle. He reloaded and moved on. Towards the back of the encampment, the man pulled out his pump-action shotgun and began to blow away grunts and jackals. A brute slammed into him, sending him flying into a tree. The man landed on his feet after a slight rotation as the brute pointed its rifle at him. The man ran at the brute while shooting. The brute let loose 24 shots from its rifle. The man destroyed its shields while pushing the brute back. The brute swung at him, and the man dodged with a jump off to the side. As the brute turned, its eyes went wide as the barrel of the shotgun charged up. 3 massive bursts erupted from the end of the barrel and blew the brute apart with ease. The man cocked his shotgun and turned to kill a jackal to find it already filled with lead from Master Chief. John walked directly up to him and looked down at the man who returned the gaze. "We don't run ahead. Do that again, and we will put shackles on you. Is that clear?" he warned. The man shrugged and walked over to a metal crate and sat down. The other Spartans followed Master Chief up to his location. "Brutes. Been a while since we've seen them around, at least with such a major part of the Covenant fleet," Frederick said. Linda squatted down and examined the head of the brute after picking it up. Anything special? Not that I can see, she said while standing up and tossing the head over to the man who rested a foot on it. So, which means we got extremely unlucky by stumbling across a part of their fleet that's becoming more integrated as they once were. Or the brutes are regrouping for something big with the Covenant. John finished. Kelly circled around and came around the building that the man was sitting in front of. We clear. All clear. She said. The man's foot continued to tap rapidly once more. So fast that it almost matched the rate that a machine might have had. The woods around them remained nearly completely silent, shy of the sounds of alien insects and the tapping of the man's foot. George looked over at him and glared through his helmet. The man looked back at him with a slightly tilted head as if to say, "What? You want me to sit still? Not my style." The radio burst to life with the sound of gunfire and screaming Marines. "Back up. We need backup. A red thing is here. Weird energy is coming out of it. The Covenant are getting back up. They're twisted. They're messed up. Oh God. Now our guys are getting back up. They're ****ing zombies. We need backdash." That was the end of the transmission. What the hell was that? Kelly demanded. The man was already on his feet. He stood up the moment he heard about a red thing with weird energy coming out of it and things coming back to life in a twisted form. Yeah, that was all too similar. No idea. It's 3 clicks that way. Master Chief pointed. The man stepped in front of them and rolled his head forward, almost to tell them to keep up with him for a change. He began to go at his full speed. Kelly sprinted after him at full steam. She knew he could keep up with her at her best, but as he continued to run faster and faster, she realized that she couldn't keep up. Kelly slowed down just a bit for the other Spartans to catch up to her. "Linda, how fast do you think he's running?" she asked. Linda watched as the man continued forward, with no sign of slowing down. "Well, best guess? Easily 45, maybe all the way to 55 miles per hour. She told her. "That guy, he's faster than some rocket launchers." What the hell is he? Chapter 4. The blue team would only need a little more than a max of 4 minutes to clear the distance. The man that was 20 miles faster than the majority of the blue team. So he was going to beat them by at least a full minute. For most men, a minute wouldn't be much time. But for him, they bet he wouldn't even need 30 seconds. They ran through the woods and found another encampment. It was in a sort of clearing of the woods, and all across the ground were corpses. An entire Marine assault team was scattered across the ground, half of which weren't human. Skin turned pale white as the majority of their face sunk into their skulls. Each one looking as the majority of their muscles and fat had seemingly been burned off their bodies, turning them into husks of what once thought to be a man. The Covenant soldiers were much similar, but with more growth to them. Skin turning more red and more demonic. Brutes looked like they had bone caps covering half their heads as their arms became thicker. The elites looked they merged with their weapons and had shards of bone coming out of their elbows and shoulder as their heads grew horns. Some 2, some even had 3. Jackals became bigger and their flesh turned more crimson as their fingers became razor sharp like claws. It was hellish. "What is this?" Frederick asked. "Some sort of flood variation?" "No," John shot out. He prayed that it wasn't. "The flood is dead. Besides, the flood was more of a disease. Nothing seemed uniform with the changes. This looked more like a mutation or transformation." "So what are the Covenant doing?" Kelly asked. "Is this their idea of an edge? Transforming their soldiers?" "Then why would our guys change as well?" Linda asked. "No, this is something worse." They reached the center of the encampment and found Ripper with the head of his shotgun pressed to the skull of what was once a Spartan. But they were no longer such. They had horns, and their flesh had turned pure black with their veins burning red. Their eyes looked like that of a lizard. Half of their armor was blown off and was bleeding darkened blood. Behind them was some sort of device that was crafted out of flesh. Above it was an orb of dark power. "Stop," Kelly called out, trying to rush over. But the man already pulled the trigger. "Son of a bitch." The man stepped away from the corpse and cracked his neck and walked over to the orb device and ran his hand over it, almost as if he was remembering it. Blue team walked over and watched what he did. Frederick was already holding a handful of dog tags. Kelly gritted her teeth under her helmet. Linda continued to scan the area, trying to figure out what the hell happened there. Then a voice erupted. "Doomslayer." It bellowed. The voice was deeper, darker, and more demonic than anything the Spartans ever even believed to be possible to hear within one's lifetime. It came from the orb. It was connected to something. "Where do you not exist?" Doomslayer, Blue team questioned. "Time, distance, matters not to you." It continued. "Doomslayer." The man grunted and grabbed what appeared to be the pulsing heart of the device and tore it off. The orb vanished along with the light coming off of it. He tossed the heart off to the side and walked off to the side and slid his shotgun into his warp pack. He knelt down to a now dead Marine that was corrupted. A hole was blown through his chest. He looked at the man's dog tag and ripped it off his neck. The man stood up and tossed the tags to Frederick. He walked over to a Covenant building and punched through the steel hull. "So," John said, walking over to the man. "You've dealt with these things before." The man nodded without looking back. "You aren't this ultimate Marine, are you?" John asked. You're something worse. Another nod. They wanted to match you. You were the model. You were something worse. The Doomslayer. John confirmed. Once again the man nodded. Well, how do we beat these things? Silence. What kind of thing did you do to swear off speaking? Linda asked. The man looked over his shoulder. Almost to say, the worst kind. The return to the bridge of the infinity. The man had removed his armor and was wearing a black short-sleeved shirt, which honestly for the men on the bridge actually wish he had kept his armor on. He practically dwarfed the muscles of the other men on the bridge. None of them were weak either. He looked over at the captain and showed half of his clenched teeth in a silent growl. So Chief, what are dealing with? Captain Lasky asked. We got reports of devices made of flesh that corrupt the dead. That's accurate. John answered. Well, what are they? He should be able to answer that. He gestured towards the man. The man raised an eyebrow and rolled his eyes. He stepped up to the center table, put his thumb to his mouth, and bit into it. His thumb bled, and he drew a circle in his own blood before drawing a pentagram in it. The captain's eyes went wide upon seeing it, and looked at the man with a concerned look. Demons? Captain Lasky asked with a chuckle. You've got to be kidding me. It would explain a lot about the odd elements and markings that his armor and the casing he was trapped in were comprised of. Dr. Halsey inputted. That doesn't make any sense. Lasky said, taking a step back. No offense, Captain, but not even 3 centuries ago we didn't even know of any life outside of a few bacteria. She reminded him. Now can you add anything else? Or do you still stick by your notion of never speaking? The man grunted at her and pulled off a large chip off his waist and inserted into a port on the main table, and taking a step back. The lights in the room flickered and he crossed his arms. Roland's image appeared above the table and stood off to the side with a confused expression of his own. Roland, what's going on? Captain Lasky questioned the AI. Roland held onto his hologram chin. Well, I think he just uploaded a new friend. What? Hello. A voice erupted as a flat hologram that looked like a fancy circle appeared next to Roland. It looked around the room and flickered a couple of times. I have integrated into this system. Quite easily as well. This is a space vessel, correct? Quite a large one as well. Running off a 75 terawatt system per year is quite impressive. Still less than my system on Mars, which took 2.4 terawatts to run at most given points in time. Who are you? Captain Lasky asked. I am the Vega 3.0 system. Vega is what Director Hayden and most referred to me as. The circle flickered with each word. It turned to the man who was crossing his arms. Thank you for keeping me alive. The man nodded. So, we are dealing with a demonic threat. How do we deal with it? Roland asked. Vega looked Roland up and down for a moment. It flickered and the disc began to morph till it changed into a person that looked like a simple man in a button-up shirt with a vest over it. Now this is interesting, Vega said, looking at his body. Not a too complicated code. Now on the demonic threat. How long ago has it occurred? Not certain. We just encountered it. Captain Lasky answered. It seems to be aiding one of our enemies. With the recorded instance that I have been involved with, the portal to hell would open and demons would come out until said portal was destroyed or closed. Vega answered. How do we close this portal when and if we find it? Dr. Halsey questioned. Destroy its anchor from both sides. Something or someone must open it from this side for the demonic presence to come through. Vega answered. Any more information? Not currently, no. Captain Lasky asked. How about combatively? How do we beat them? Doom Marine. Vega asked. The man put 2 fingers to the side of his head and quickly jerked them away. He is quite efficient when it comes to killing them. Speaking about him. Who is he? Dr. Halsey demanded. The Doomslayer. Vega answered. From a mixture of records and cryptic writings. He once was a warrior of another dimension that merged with hell. He was the last man to stand against their forces before finally being captured and sealed away before Samuel Hayden discovered him and brought him back to the facility on Mars. All the records we found agreed upon one thing, though, that they fear him above all else. What about the Ultimate Marine Project? Dr. Halsey asked. We modeled it after him, using different forms of science and practices to create a person as powerful as him. Vegan answered. And he killed it. Wait, so he scares hell. A Marine said, pointing at him. And they call him Doomslayer? The motherfucking Doom guy? You've got to be joking. That is the dumbest name I have heard. The man, now called Doomslayer, looked at him with a lowered gaze as if to say. The man looked away and whistled. The man returned to looking forward. Whether or not that is accurate, Lasky said, stepping up. He gestured towards the man. If we found this portal, would you be able to close it? The man nodded. Then that is our main objective. We have 1 week to repair the warp drive. In the meantime, we shall find and destroy this hell portal. But we need to do it as quickly as possible. If we stay too long, then Cortana will definitely locate us. All clear? Yes, sir. Master Chief said, straightening up a bit. The man's expression did not change. Dismissed, Captain Lasky told them. The Doomslayer pulled Vega out of the computer and onto his side. Master Chief followed the man as he went back to the place where he had removed his armor and watched as the man put the armor back on. The man looked up at John's visor before sliding his helmet on. He reached into his warp pack and pulled out a double-barrel shotgun and walking down the hallway. So, Linda's voice shot into John's head through his helmet. Who is he? A man called the Doomslayer. He's not human, John told her. And when you say that you mean it, don't you? Linda sighed. So about these demons, anything on them? The man told us that they can be killed, which is good to know. John replied. How about stopping it altogether? We have to go to hell. We've been through it before. Isn't that right, demon? She half mocked. We'll go through a lot more. Master Chief replied. But that man, from the looks of it, he's done a lot more than just been through hell. What does that mean? We'll just have to figure that out. Chapter 5. The Doomslayer was located in one of the lower decks at the firing range. He was pointing a plasma rifle down the range as target after target popped up. Each one he blew away with quite easy. The level that the range was simply set at Spartan level. He did try the lower levels, but found it too easy for his tastes. This level was at least close to his own level. Several Marines watched as he blew the targets as soon as they popped up. He was shooting so fast and accurately, it was actually hard to tell which one of the targets he was aiming at first. He kept at it for nearly half an hour with nearly a 95% accuracy rate, a level that was only reached with the most prestigious of Spartans. Have you heard what he's called? One of the Marines started up as he was back with a group of 7 other. Doomslayer, he said, dragging out the name in a sort of mocking sense. The man did not seem to care as he loaded up more energy cells into the rifle. Sounds like the name that some angsty teenager would give his character in some online game. He calls himself the Slayer of Doom? One laughed. I bet the Master Chief could kick his ass. He's just a Spartan ripoff. Another stated. The man put away his rifle and headed towards the exit of the level. The Marines looked at his score that was now on a screen, and they felt all their own words shoot back into their throats. 97% accuracy. Only person to reach a higher rate was the Spartan 058. They watched as a female Spartan in white armor walked towards the path of the Doomslayer. Good job, she said to him. I'm the Spartan Commander Palmer. I haven't seen anyone reach that rate in the longest time. He looked up at her as he reached the elevator. He looked up at her with a tilt of his head and a shift of his shoulders. They weren't kidding when they said he never talked. But the message was clear to her, so what? You're better than any of them, she told him, referencing the men that were mocking him for what they believed to be a false tittle. He straightened his composure. But you don't disagree. With that, the elevator arrived, and he headed back up to the deployment level. His free time was up. He was going to meet back up with the blue team and head out to a large grouping of Covenant soldiers. Palmer watched as the elevator went up. He didn't seem to care. He really didn't. He reached a deployment deck and saw that there were 5 other Spartan teams as well as nearly 200 some other Marines. Warthogs, Scorpions, Mantises, and even some Grizzlies also occupied the deck. He once again reached into Warp Pack and pulled out his double-barrel shotgun. He stepped up to the blue team after finding them and stood there as they went over the plan. This is just going to be the foothold team, one of the Marines said as he was nearby the blue team. How many of our Spartans are throwing at this? Around 80, right? Not to mention 400 Marines. Pretty insane. The Doomslayer simply inspected his shotgun once more by popping it open and closed once more. The blue team knew that he could handle himself. Even more so. But he also seemed to be the kind of guy that didn't like working with others. Honestly, they could not understand why though. The best way they could explain how he was outside of combat would be itchy, stressed, restrained. Like all he ached for was blood. He didn't even have any sort of dog tag, for he did not seem to believe in the very possibility of his death on the battlefield. Either that or he simply had forgotten, by choice or other, to forget whatever sort of being he was before he became the thing he was now. The blue team got onto a pair of Warthogs. Master Chief drove one with Linda in the back on the turret. The other was being driven by Kelly, and in the back was not the machine gun that M12 variant had, but had a multiple launch rocket system on the back. The Doomslayer looked up in it and nodded a few times. I'm going to leave it up to you, Frederick said as he stood off to the side. The Doomslayer looked back up at it for a second before shrugging and held out a hand towards it. Thanks. Frederick hopped on the back of it, the Warthog bouncing with his weight a bit, and looked back down at him. That shotgun isn't going to really work while in the Warthog, Frederick told him. The Doomslayer looked down at his shotgun and almost seemed to sigh as he put it into his warp pack. If you still got that assault rifle in that pack of yours, I would recommend dashed. The Doomslayer pulled out a rocket launcher. Or that. That works too. So tell me, Doomslayer. Kelly began. You ready to kick some alien ass? The Doomslayer shook his rocket launcher slightly. She shrugged a bit. I guess that's why you've got that. All right, men. Captain Lasky came over the speakers. We're deploying. You all know the location that we are headed towards. We are most likely going to be facing an entrenched Covenant force. But above it all, we must push through. If we don't, I fear a threat unlike anything the UNSC has ever faced before will arise. A threat that we cannot deal with. So if we do not stop them now, we will fall. So we will not fail. I'm leaving it up to you to get us the foothold we need. I know you will succeed. Now with that all being said, good luck. The Infinity has to return to orbit as not to get damaged by the carriers that the Covenant possesses. We shall return upon your victory. The dock lowered and planted itself into the dirt. The vehicles plowed over it as pelicans and condors flew overhead along with falcons. The ground below them was crushed and turned up under the weight of their machines as they went forward. As they did, whatever little subtlety that they could have had went flying out of the window. Several dozen miles ahead were the Covenant as they prepared for intercept. The humans wish to push us back, the elite commander of the Covenant said within his command post. His armor was like that of hybrid between the elites and a brute's chieftain. He watched through a monitor as the Infinity took off into the orbit. Is that all the forces that they will deploy upon us? The humans think too little of us. It is there. The demonic voice broke through the elite's post and rattled the entire room that he was in. The Doomslayer. Your legend is no threat to us. The elite told the voice. Even the demon is amongst them, but he is weaker than he once was. Something restrains and aches his flesh. You believe that the imitator is killable. The voice continued. The Doomslayer is not. You gave the imitator the name out of respect and hatred. Its name is earned through strife and fear alone. They will not defeat us now. The elite answered. They will perish, and once there we shall glass their entire planet. Now be gone. I have an army to lead. For the sake of your being, you best be powerful enough to stand behind such grandeur statements. And with that the voice vanished. The elite growled and pulled on a transmitter. Deploy everything. He called into it. Crush them before they get even halfway to the valley. Does that include dash? Yes. Send in the Scarabs. Chapter 6. Wish they put disc players in these things. Kelly asked. The Doomslayer looked at her for a second out of slight disbelief before turning forwards once more as they rode across the plains of the planet as it got gradually more uneven and turned into a rocky land more than the desert and forests where they had come from. I thought you hated sitting in silence. She couldn't tell, but he looked at her out of the corner of his eye before rolling both. She was right, of course, but that didn't mean he had to be entertained each and every second. He actually found it almost therapeutic just to observe the army around them. He looked in the rearview mirror and stared at the tanks once more and nodded a couple of times before looking straight once more. Okay, betting pool. A voice came over the Warthog's radio. How long till we see the Covenant? Most is on 20 minutes. Any of you Spartans want to get on this? Kelly connected back. I'm going with 25. How about you, Frederick? She called back. 15. He called forward. That's 1 for 25 and 1 for 15. She looked back at the Doomslayer who was holding out a spread hand to show all of his fingers. Oh, and 1 for 5 minutes. He lowered a finger. 4. Another lowered. 3. Oh shit. She said looking forward and saw several Covenant banshees rising up from the distance and coming straight at them. Sorry guys. We have the winner in here. Send the winnings to the Doom Marine. She put down the radio. Frederick, you ready? Frederick prepped the rocket launcher. Load it. Then start unloading. Kelly called back. Out of the corner of her eye she saw the Doomslayer nodding a bit. Banshees, ghosts, and wraiths began to fire at them, and the human force began to return the favor. Thousands of plasma shots flew through the air. Thousands of bullets traded with them. Hundreds of rockets flew at either. A warthog exploded right next to the Spartans. Overhead, a banshee exploded before crashed next to a mongoose as it swerved out of the way. Frederick began to launch rocket after rocket from the turret into the weakest positions of the Covenant advancing force. The Doom Marine, with his almost magical rocket launcher, launched one after the other. Within the first minute, he had seemed to have launched nearly 17 already, each one exploding into a ghost as it came into range. A chopper kept getting close to the Warthog as Kelly drove through the Covenant force, as it tried to take out the 2 Spartans and Doomslayer. The Doomslayer missed his 18th shot on it and seemed to get distressed over it. The chopper drove by again, and the brute that was driving it gave a sort of mocking grin as they could not focus it as Frederick had to focus the wraiths. The Doomslayer turned to Kelly. What? She asked. He jerked his head towards the chopper. She looked back at him, and she seemed to sigh. Just come back, you silent asshole. The chopper came close again, and as Kelly drifted around with it, the Doomslayer stood up on the edge of it as he put his rocket launcher away and pulled out his double-barrel shotgun. The chopper came close, and the Doomslayer jumped off the Warthog and on top of the chopper. He looked down at the brute as it drove around. Its eyes went wide as the head of the double barrel was shoved into its mouth, breaking its teeth. Its head exploded, and the Doomslayer kicked its corpse off and hopped on and began to drive it. He began to shoot through a ghost before plowing through its mostly destroyed chassis. He then saw it damaged and got a terrible idea. He took out the grenades that were on the chopper, primed them, tossed them onto the head of the chopper, and reeved it as hard as he could while aiming for it. He broke the throttle before jumping off it and watching as it plowed into the wraith in a glorious explosion. The Doomslayer then began to run off to the side as the Warthog came around, and he jumped in while pulling out his rocket launcher once more. All right, that was impressive, Kelly said. But next time, try to add some finesse to it. He turned and looked at her. She returned his look for a moment before rolling her eyes. He then turned back and launched 2 rockets into a banshee that crashed. Right as it crashed, they appeared over the rock formations that were towards the caverns that they were headed towards. 3 black scarabs, each with purple warlike designs painted onto them. Frederick paused firing for a moment. Shit. He cursed as they began to fire into the largest parts of their forces. We got to get the fuck out of here. We can't fight them like this. We'll lose too many. We can't take them down. We're going to start pulling out. Master Chef came over the radio. Look for an opportunity to flank them. Wilco, Kelly replied into the radio before turning practically around. Damn it. How'd we not know about those things? We just don't have the firepower to take those things on head-on. By the time we get close enough, half the company will get destroyed. Frederick answered. The Doomslayer stood up in his seat and turned back to Frederick and tapped on the rocket launcher to his attention. What? He said, turning to face him. The Doomslayer then slapped him in the face and pointed to the rocket turret and his own rocket launcher and pointed to the Scarabs as they continued to fire on the retreating forces. The only way to destroy those things is to get close enough to hit their reactors. Otherwise, we can't do anything to them with our current firepower. Frederick told him. It's too dangerous. The Doomslayer's gaze did not change. Not even Grizzlies have the armor to take a shot from those things. Same gaze. We are not willing to risk the Marines. The Doomslayer gave a slight tilt of his head and jetted his head forward a bit. Who said anything about anyone else? Was his expression. The Doom Marine is saying to go in, isn't he? Linda asked. Yep. Kelly said. Suicide run. We've done a few of those before. Master Chef stated. The Marines have mostly pulled out. Blue team, new objective. Take out the Scarabs so we can complete our original objective. Doom Marine. When we get in close. He sat back down in the seat and primed his rocket launcher. John, I don't think he really has any other level of hitting. Kelly answered as she turned around the Warthog. The Doomslayer almost seemed to laugh in agreement. Chapter 7. Inside one of the Scarabs on one of the monitors within the monster of a machine, a grunt looked out on the battlefield, laughing at the fact that the humans were running away from them for once. The little alien creature found it quite funny. It scanned the area closer to them and saw two warthogs coming at them and zoomed in onto out of them. In the driver's seat, it saw Master Chief. The Spartan seemingly looked up at it for a moment. In response, it screamed. Ah! It cried out as it jumped back a bit. Another grunt came up behind it. What is it? The other grunt looked at the monitor as well and panned over to the second, seeing two Spartans and another. The third person seemed to look at the grunt, pointed, and then patted his rocket launcher. The grunt slowly took 2 steps away from the monitor and looked at the other. Oh, we dead. We dead. Ignoring the two, idiot grunted. The elite commander in the Scarab pointed to the monitors of the gunners. Fools. They try to buy time for the others. Obliterate them. Vaporize their blood. Do not stop until they are. The elite commander said, taking a step back. The demon has bothered us too much. He shall not halt us any further. The Scarabs let loose their lasers that could destroy an entire line of tanks within a moment, blasting at the warthogs that swerved and maneuvered out of the blast ranges, keeping away from the trail of glass that the lasers left behind. Kelly grit her teeth as she drove as best she could, Master Chief doing much the same. Dodging one of these lasers would have been easy enough for a Spartan, but dodging 3 was an issue. Even with the 2 of them, one of them would still always have 2 Scarabs aiming and firing at them, and that is what they were hoping for. If the Covenant finally smartened up, for once they could focus all fire onto a single one of them and blown them away in mere moments. But luck was on their side after all. Frederick primed the rocket turret once more and began to unload rocket after rocket into the closest joint of a Scarab that he could find. The joints were weaker than the rest of the hulls, but not by much. In the other Warthog, Linda was using firing towards the top of the Scarabs at the platform that was atop of it, the jackals at the edge jumping away from the edge. So we got them pissed off? How are we taking them out? Kelly called out as the radio was on speaker practically. 3 non-drivers. 3 Scarabs. They'll board and take out whatever crew is on board. John told them. Okay, how are we going to get up there? There are spikes on the side of them. Use those to get up higher. Use the boosters on your suits if you need to. Roger, Kelly said before looking back at Frederick. Can you handle that? I'll manage. Get us close. Frederick answered. Over on Master Chief's Warthog. Clear out a Scarab? You do know I'm better at a distance. Linda asked. Yes, but I also know our options. Master Chef said as he drifted between 2 beams. We have to do this. All right, get us close. Linda told him, and he shifted the gear once more and hit on the gas. The Warthog went forward near its highest speed as Chief made a beeline for the closest Scarab. A laser carved into the ground behind the 2 Spartans' vehicles as they drove as fast as possible, the other laser closing the gap in front of them. Master Chief waited till they had barely 3 feet between either the front or back of the Warthog and death. He then slammed on the front brakes and swung the Warthog to 90 degrees and swerved around and under the front laser and drove directly at the Scarab. He waved his hand as he came right next to the Scarab, and Linda jumped off the back of the Warthog and grabbed one of the spikes popping out of the Scarab and threw herself higher up. She landed on the top platform and found herself surrounded by grunts and jackals. One to her left and one to her left aimed rocket launchers at her. She spun around slightly as she crouched and had both rockets fly over her back and blow away the groups to either side of her. She ran at a jackal with a shield and slammed a knee into its shield, throwing it off. One with a rifle pointed at her. She grabbed the end of the barrel and pointed it up as she kicked it in the chest, and over the side. She turned quickly and used that riffle to headshot the 2 remaining jackals and 3 remaining grunts before tossing it to the side and pulling her riffle of her back. She slowly walked down toward the control room of the Scarab, and as she came around the corner, time almost seemed to slow as an elite in the middle of the room turned around to face her. 3 elites. 2 of their shields were down. The third would have his shields up in 0.5 seconds. Yeah, this was too easy. She pulled the trigger seamlessly once, but yet 3 bullets left the barrel, the bullets digging into the skulls of the 3 elites with a splat sound as their heads exploded. She then pointed her magnum around the room, pulling off a headshot on all the grunts before they could move no more than combined 7 feet. Scarab clear, she said over her helmet's comms. Over at Doomslayer's, Kelly's, and Frederick's Warthog. Linda just dealt with hers. Kelly called back as Frederick got ready to jump onto the edge of the Scarab. Understood, Frederick said, rotating his neck. Here we go. He launched himself with his boosters halfway up the Scarab before climbing up the other half. When he reached the top, he grabbed a grunt by the back of the head and smashed it into the platform. He raised up his other arm and blocked a bolt to his face from a jackal. He threw the grunt into the jackal that they went falling off the edge. A grunt launched a rocket at him, and he dodged before running at it with a knee into its face, breaking it. He pulled his shotgun off his back, flipped it so he was holding it by the end of the barrel, and swung it into a jackal's face. Its head exploded. Frederick flipped his shotgun again and grabbed it by the stock once again. A brute with Mauler pistol came up. They locked eyes and the brute put his Mauler away and extended his arms out to his side and grunted. Frederick slowly put his shotgun back onto his back. He then gestured for the brute to come towards him as he put his fists up in a boxing stance. I'll make this quick, Frederick uttered. The brute ran at him ready to rip him apart, but instead felt its jaw shatter as Frederick swung and hit it with a massive right hook. Frederick swung his other and it slammed into the brute's face, making it stumble backwards with every bone in its face being shattered or fractured by now. Frederick stepped in while swinging his fist up into its stomach with a massive uppercut that bent its armor and broke 2 ribs as several organs broke open. He kept driving his fist upwards and lifted the brute and over his head and turned and slammed it back into the ground on its back. It spat up blood and looked up at Frederick that was now holding its Mauler pistol. Frederick pulled the trigger and walked down into the control pit as he pulled his shotgun off his back and dual-wielded them as he cleared the control room and dropped the Mauler pistol as he reloaded his shotgun. Cleared, he called over his comms. An elite wrapped its hand around his ankle. He let his shotgun drop into his hand and bashed the stock through the top of the elite's skull. Over at Doomslayer's and Kelly's Warthog. You're up, Kelly said. The Doomslayer launched himself up to the top of the Scarab and pointed his double-barrel shotgun into the face of a grunt. Its eyes went wide as he pulled the trigger and destroyed its entire head and killed the jackal behind it. A grunt that had gone crazy activated several sticky grenades and ran at Doomslayer, who proceeded to sidestep the grunt and thwack it on its back as it passed, and it fell over the side and exploded. A jackal held up its shield and shot at him from behind it. He reloaded and blew off its arm along with half its face from the opening. An elite ran up behind him and reloaded and slammed the end of the barrel under its chin and pulled the trigger. Its head exploded and another elite ran at him while shooting. He didn't have time to reload, so he reached into his warp pack and pulled out his assault rifle as he jumped off the edge of the Scarab. The elite paused for a moment before the Doomslayer activated the boosters on his legs and came back onto the Scarab and off to the side. He unloaded 20 shots into the head of the elite, destroying its shields and its brain. He pulled out his double-barrel shotgun and reloaded as he went down to the control room to find the commanding elite next to 2 dead grunts that looked like they had blown the other's head off. I was hoping for the demon, the elite said as the Scarab was now firing on autopilot. It turned around slowly to the Doomslayer and took the handle of his plasma sword off his waist. But yet before me stands a mere mortal, like the creatures that the demon calls brothers, but not. Yet you still challenge the Covenant. The elite commander activated his plasma sword. Your challenge is noted. Now meet mine. The Doomslayer looked the elite then to its plasma sword and back to the elite again. He tilted his head slightly as almost as a sign of disbelief. He shook his head slightly and slowly before putting his double shotgun away and reaching into the warp pack once more and pulled out. Hey, mother. Fucking. Chainsaw. He wrapped one hand around the cord and reeved it once, then twice, and on the third time it came to life with a sound that was metal being shredded or a fire being fueled explosives. The dozens of blades spun around the bar, like the awful metal teeth of a demonic dragon. The Doomslayer brought up his neck with a slight crack and took a step forward. Oh fuck, the elite said. The Doomslayer dashed at him. Chapter 8. Blue team gathered around the final destroyed Scarab in which the Doomslayer had destroyed, and it was now smoking as its engine was destroyed and the legs gave out. The hatch in the front of the broken Scarab was lowered and the Doomslayer walked down the broken ramp with his assault rifle primed and ready as the corpses of different Covenant soldiers littered the ground in front of the entrance. Must have seen the Scarabs going down and headed in to assist. Linda observed while nudging one of the corpses. Yeah, but why his? Frederick inquired. I'm going to scan the databanks of this one as well. Good work, big guy, Frederick said as he passed the Doomslayer with a quick pat to his shoulder. Doomslayer stared at Master Chief, who just shrugged. Frederick stepped over the corpses of the grunted and felt his foot shove something off to the side. He looked down and found the handle of a plasma sword along with the hand of an elite. His eyes scanned the floor and found pieces of an elite's breastplate scattered across the floor, almost as if they had been ripped apart by a monster. A splatter of blood was also with them. Further up, he saw a leg of an elite as it was cut off from the body. A line of blood going up to the body of an elite as it pressed its remaining hand to a comm device, as there was almost a line of missing flesh from its shoulder to the small of its back. Blood splattered and pooled all around its body, the expression on its face being that of fear. So clear of an expression that even its alien features seemed to be surpassed by the truly deep amount of fear on its face. Frederick walked off to the side to one of the monitors and activated it. As the information downloaded itself onto the drive he plugged in, he opened a separate window. He turned on the video feed of the single camera inside of that control room. A fucking chainsaw, Frederick exclaimed to himself. He watched as the Doomslayer dashed into the elite with a lowered chainsaw before raising it up to cut off the hand that wielded the plasma sword that clattered to the ground. As he raised the chainsaw, he swung it down diagonally into the elite's chest and cut through the breastplate and chest as the elite screamed from the loss of its hand. The elite stumbled back, and the Doomslayer brought back his chainsaw to cut off its leg. At this moment, the elite began to crawl towards the comm device to call for help. Only then its shields coming up as it slowly crawled toward the comm device. As he did, the Doomslayer just watched, and for the first time that Frederick knew of, walked slowly behind it. The elite reached the comms and said some things into it that was alien. The Doomslayer pressed the end of the spinning chain to the small of the elite's back and began to push. The silent friction as it battled the shields for a moment before plunging into the elite's back. It went through the entirety of the body, the colon being torn and ripped out of the body as it moved with the chain of the saw. Slowly, the Doomslayer dragged the chainsaw blade up through the elite's body as it screamed and cried out into the comms, letting every Covenant squad in a 100,000 miles know his pain. Before the blade tore out of the elite's right shoulder, and the elite cried out of pain and fear as his heart was on the other side. For several seconds, he was alive. He was left in that state as the Doomslayer just dropped his chainsaw into his warp pack and pulled out an assault rifle and examined it for a moment before walking towards the engine. Only after the Doomslayer left the shot did the elite finally die. Frederick turned away from the screen and at the elite as he pulled out the drive. He walked back to the lowered ramp. All good? Kelly asked. At his return, the Doomslayer pushed himself off the wall of where he was leaning on. Frederick then punched him across the face. The Doomslayer recoiled back for a moment and stumbled back into the wall for a moment before looking back up at Frederick. I don't give a fuck what your deal is, Frederick hissed out, while shoving his finger from a shacking hand down at the Doomslayer. But you are sick. You are worse than whatever kind of monsters you fight. The Doomslayer kept looking up at him, shrugged, and headed to Linda and Chief's warthog. What was up there? Kelly asked. You can watch the video yourself later, Frederick answered. Let's just say, he's fucked up. A little over 120 miles away at the base of the Covenant base, they always watched the video of the Doomslayer as he sent his little message. The commander of this branch of the Covenant watched it over and over again, at least 7 times now as he sat within his command center. This is what it is. He does not hold quarrel, mercy, or patience for any blood other than what is in his veins or similar. The Seraphims did not give his armor to such a creature. The elite was quiet for a moment. Do you know what this place was? It was a training ground, this spot being the main encampment. The planet has a wide variety of different landscapes and environments. As a test for those who would be a war chief or just another soldier, the brutes would take out the recruits, no armor nor weapon, and have them return. That was the ritual on this planet. After that, they would gather here once more. Having trekked anywhere between 70 to 140 miles with the last 24 being refused, they very last being killed. They would have a melee, fighting each other. Killing was not allowed the early rounds. The losers becoming soldiers, then there would be a pit with spikes around the edge of it where 4 brutes would enter. The one that survived would become a chieftain. A year before the prophet was killed along with one of the rings and the flood, they let elites join. Most elites refused. Too barbaric for most. Those who did were immediately targeted, ripped limb from limb. For 2 years, not a single one survived. Over a 150 elites ripped and torn apart across those several trials. Then the 3rd year of the elites came. The elite said, looking over his shoulder as a slit with space and time to a dark, red, brimstone landscape. 100 miles I trekked. Along my way, I killed the 15 brutes that came to kill me. Into the pits I dove. Each one that tried to kill me I killed. When I reached that spiked pit, I was the only one that truly belonged there. He said, standing up. I knew fear. Surrounded at all times by beasts, all wanting to kill me, always looking for a chance to rip out my throat. When I stood above those 3 final corpses, I knew I was stronger. No other elite has done what I have. The elite walked around and looked up into the fires. I did not fear them. I hated them. I killed them. I do not fear this Slayer, nor do I fear the demon, nor do I fear you. The fire began to wrap itself around him with an eerie and sickening power. So let's kill them both. Chapter 9. There is a plethora of information contained within this vessel. Vega stated from his hologram figure as the Doomslayer stared at the ceiling of his quarters. Some of these firewalls are nay impregnable. I have only been able to bypass a few due to the fact they are not prepared to deal with older codes. As the statement goes, those who forget the past. The Doomslayer continued to stare at the ceiling. He had no need for idle time. Idle time was for those that had nothing to do, and he certainly still had much to do. The only thing that this time let him do was trace his scars with the tip of his fingernail, remembering each and every different wound that he had experienced over the decades. The only true being to be able to match him being the Titan. But even if he killed, he remembered walking through its mouth the last time he was in hell, as it almost became part of the very landscape. The Doomslayer sat up and picked up a 50-pound dumbbell off the floor. He tossed it up and down in the palm of his hand for a minute before letting it fall back to the floor. Doom Marine, we need you down in the combat training room within the next 10 minutes. A voice came on inside of his room. He grunted and got off the bed. He entered the combat training room, basically an average-sized square room with white padded floor. Dr. Halsey walked up to him. Hello again. I requested that you came down here because I wanted to see your hand-to-hand combat abilities. From reports, you more use your fists to kill than your actually weaponry. She explained to him as 10 other Marines were also within the room. The Doom Marine looked around for a second before looking back at her with a contempt look on his face. Don't kill them. He shrugged and walked towards the center of the room, and the Marines gathered around him. The Doom Marine watched them all in their tight-fitting shirts and combat shorts. He, on the other hand, wore a white t-shirt and cargo pants. The most confident-looking one of them slid on padded gloves. The last records of you were about 200 years ago, the Marine said while stretching a bit. Our combat has evolved. Your black belt is our green belt. I bet without your suit you ain't strong. The Doom Marine looked at the padded gloves and noticed that there had to be some sort of metal around the knuckles from the way they looked. He also noticed he was wearing some sort of hard plastic knee covers. Along with him, the rest of Marines had some pads under their shirts. His gaze slowly went up to the Marine's face, and he flexed his hands while they were at his side, sending small crackles throughout the room. Get to it. Dr. Halsey called out. The head Marine dashed forward and hit the Doom Marine across the cheek with a right cross before hitting him across the other with a left hook. He swung around his right knee into the Doom Marine's side before hitting him with a right straight as he jumped back. The Marine smirked as he brought up his fists in a boxing stance. The Doom Marine's gazed at the floor before he slowly brought his head back up and looked at the Marine with a small cut across his left cheek. The Doom Marine raised an eyebrow at the man. A Marine from the left dashed forward with a left Superman punch and drove it into the Doom Marine's cheek. As the fist slipped off towards the front of the Doom Marine's face, his other hand came up and clenched the man's knuckles with his right fist. What the hell? The man demanded as he tried to yank back away from the ironclad grip. The Doom Marine just continued to stare at the head Marine. Let go, you ass. The Marine began to punch the side of the Doom Marine's head, shaking his head ever slightly and making his left eye blink. The cut continued to grow and blood covered the Marine's right fist. Then all of a sudden there was a pop sound, and the Marine stopped and wrapped his right hand around his left arm as he let out a yelp. The Doom Marine just dislocated 2 of his left knuckles as he clamped down harder. He yanked the arm in front of him and brought down his tricep down over the man's elbow and broke it before swinging his back fist around into the Marine's face. The Marine collapsed to the floor unconscious with a broken elbow. What the shit? One Marine exclaimed. The Doom Marine kicked the Marine off to the side, outside of the circle of men, before wiping his palm over his cut to wipe away the blood. 3 Marines dashed at him, and he punched the first one so hard in the stomach that he vomited before collapsing. One of the others tried to kick him in the neck, and he caught the kick as the other tried to punch him, which he deflected before punching him in the face and breaking his cheekbone along with his nose before hitting the ground. Another Marine came around, and he grabbed the Marine's leg with both arms and swung the first one around like a weapon and knocked the second one into the ground before slamming the Marine that he used as a weapon into the floor. 5. The one he knocked down he stomped in the stomach, so he vomited upwards and almost choked as it went back down his throat. He blocked the next punch with his forearm before wrapping his arm around that one and grabbing him by the armpit as he dug a thumb into it. He kicked that man in the kneecap to break it before punching him in the face. Another came at him with a punch, and he grabbed him by the wrist while he tucked under him and wrapped the other hand behind a thigh and lifted him up across his shoulders. He fell down and let the man's right shoulder slam into the floor, breaking his collar and shoulder bone. 7. Another tried to tackle him, and he moved off to the side while he was tucked down and grabbed his legs as he was bent over and yanked him down, so the Marine's face crashed into the ground before the Doom Marine dislocated his hips as the Marine's legs went behind his back while his face was in the floor. The Doom Marine slowly walked towards the first Marine as another ran up behind him, which he simply took down with a behind-the-shoulder punch. The first Marine began to shake out of fear, while the Doom Marine pulled his thumb across the cut on his cheek and marked the forehead of the Marine with a spot of his blood before taking a step back. Marine gulped before the Doom Marine dashed forward and slammed his forehead into the Marine's and had him hit the ground as his skull fractured. The Doom Marine walked back over to Dr. Halsey and stared down at her. Without her even realizing it, she had grabbed a pin off to the table and was holding it as if primed to stab him with it. She had created the Spartans, the greatest warriors the galaxy had ever seen, each one of them having the potential to decimate entire armies. This man, though, your fighting style is odd. She shared her observation with him. You use a sort of deadly variation of wrestling techniques, overpowering your enemies with your strength. Your weapons almost seem to be your shield as you rush in to use your actual weapons, your guns being only necessary to kill your larger foes. Impressive. He grunted and turned to walk back towards the door that he entered in. I got the report from Blue Team about your collective actions against the Scarabs. She informed him as he reached the door. Frederick also showed me the video of you killing an elite commander. He turned back to her. Good work. The medical team will be here soon. Do not worry about them. The Doomslayer gave a huff and left the room. Dr. Halsey and looked back at the first Marine to attack the Doomslayer. I should have given them all those gloves. Chapter 10. Before we begin this meeting, I would once again want to thank Blue Team for taking care of those Scarabs. Captain Lasky said to Blue Team as they stood on the deck of the Infinity. Fireteam Osiris was also on the deck, but remained a distance away from the Blue Team, especially Locke as he kept eyeing Master Chief. The Doomslayer sat off to the side as he stared at his helmet's visor as he kept taking apart and putting back together a small puzzle that resembled a gun. Of course it wasn't real. Who would be crazy enough to mess with a live magnum with a direct line of fire towards the captain? Each member of the Spartan teams kept glancing over at the Doomslayer, but all he seemed to care about was his reflection in his visor as he stared at the small scab on his cheek. Lasky had a cold sweat on his forehead. Roland, pull up the map, he called out and tapped on the center console on the bridge. The small yellow pilot hologram appeared with a flat hologram map appearing above the center of the console as well. Red and blue triangles and circles appeared on it. All right, thanks to our push the other day, the Covenant has seemed to pull back. But that is a good news, bad news sort of deal, Roland said as he gestured at the spot of the map with the majority of the red markings. They all pulled back into that stone valley of theirs. These scans have been of thermal and sonic radar, but the numbers could be twice this or half of this. Let's hope for one and be prepared for the other, Bucky stated. The Doomslayer looked up at him and raised his eyebrows for a moment before going back to his puzzle. You know which ones he means. Linda directed at him. He simply shrugged. A small blue hologram appeared next to him. My understanding of these Covenant aliens are that they seem to have a soar of gale to them compared to what would be labeled their main fleet, Vega stated. Roland raised an eyebrow at him. A second Vega body appeared behind Roland at the map and highlighted the area that was between the center and outer defenses of the Covenant. As such, this area will be less guarded, either from overconfidence in their front lines or desire for a greater battle. The second Vega body vanished, and the highlighted area went back to normal. But what, or your demons, they haven't been acting up since the first day we got here? Locke questioned. They acted up the first day because it was the first time they saw humans for a really long time, Kelly observed. She looked over at the Doomslayer, who nodded. Question still stands, Locke said as he crossed his arms. Maybe they are preparing for something, Bucky said with a shrug. Then we have to act now, Captain Lasky stated. If they go ahead with whatever plan they might be scheming with these demons, then we might not be able to stop them, and having a force that gains a soldier for each one they kill isn't ideal. The Doomslayer held up 2 fingers as he held his puzzle in the other hand. Peace? Tanaka asked, confused. He glared. They gain 2. John clarified as he understood the point. The one they kill, and the one on the other side that can't pull the trigger on their friend. It's the same situation as the Flood, but with that they made their bodies weaker, but able to reproduce much faster. With these they become stronger. All the more reason, Captain Lasky said, to get the room to refocus on him. The map began to change. Now I want your 2 teams to hit the valley from 2 different points. Distract them as the main force blows through the point in the middle as their force is diverted. After that, all Spartan teams will converge onto the central area of their base and close whatever is allowing this hell energy to seep into this planet. Understood? Yes, sir. All Spartans confirmed at once. The Doomslayer grunted and put the puzzle on a table before sliding on his helmet. Blue Team and the Doomslayer flew low in a pelican towards their drop-off point just outside of the Stone Valley's perimeter, the landscape being a mixture of stone and woods. Linda flew the pelican, of course, with the rest of the group sitting in the back. The Doomslayer twirled a pistol in his hands, one that he had gotten plenty of use out of. He kept looking over its iron sights off to the side, charging and discharging the blast that it held. He never fired, of course. Nevertheless, Blue Team felt with each charge he was going to let go. Kill a bird or pig or something. The Doomslayer just wanted to kill. His shoulder rose and fell in an unnatural pattern. Long, long, pause, short, 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 pause, long, long, pause, short, short, short. Like he was practicing how fast he could recover from being out of breath. You better not pull any of the same stuff with that elite. Frederick told him. The Doomslayer looked over at him for a moment and shrugged a single shoulder. Do you have any long-range weapons? Linda called from the cockpit. The Doomslayer nodded. He does. Kelly answered. A scope on an assault rifle does not count. She called back once more. He shook his head, and Kelly translated. Well, what is it? He dropped his pistol into his warp pack and slowly pulled out an ever longer weapon and held it in both hands as the majority of its length was outside of the Pelican. He shook it a bit at Blue Team, who just stared at it. Linda looked in a rear-view mirror for a moment and saw it. You use a railgun as a long-range weapon? She questioned. He simply nodded before she looked back to the front. His long-range weapons are a rocket launcher and railgun. Medium range is a pulse rifle, assault rifle, and a pistol. Short range is a double-barrel shotgun and a pump-action shotgun. Super close range is his fists and a chainsaw. Next thing you are going to tell me that he has a Gatling gun. He slowly shrugged, and all other members of Blue Team looked at him. Linda sighed. He basically said he did have one, didn't he? Yes. John replied. And each and every one of those guns has enough ammunition to level a small building. Linda said as she brought down the Pelican. We're landing. Get ready for a fight. The Doomslayer jumped out and looked down his railgun as Blue Team gathered behind him with their guns pointed in all directions. Marching farther into the enemy's defenses. From the stones and the trees around them, they began to notice more and more Covenant aliens. 3 chieftains stood with their gravity hammers primed as a dozen other brutes, jackals, grunts, and elites began to appear for each and every one of them. There had to be at least 50 of them. Several of the elites activated plasma swords and growled at the team as they all had their guns trained on the other. Half the grunts had rocket launchers, and half the jackals were back on top of a ridge with stone cover, another quarter in the trees, and the rest having shields. How many are you counting? John asked the group. 50 at minimum. Linda called out. Probably 85. 17 each then. Frederick said. I'm willing to put money on the idea that this is probably a third of all the fighters in the area. At minimum. I'm counting 92. Kelly said with a shrug. The Doomslayer charged up his cannon and fired it, and had it pierce through one of the jackal's shields, killing it, and the grunt behind it. The Intercovenant force and Blue Team stared at him. 90. Kill them all. One of the chieftains cried out. The Doomslayer put away his railgun and pulled out his double-barrel shotgun and ran into the fire of the entire force. Linda fired 3 shots and took out 3 jackals from the trees as John and Frederick laid down cover fire for Kelly as she ran in the other direction of the Doomslayer. The Doomslayer noticed 2 jackals and a grunt standing close together and pulled out a strange-looking grenade. It landed behind them and exploded, sending out a sort of red dome that began to siphon power off them before the dome vanished, and the 3 of them collapsed dead. He ran at a brute and jumped up into the air with a double jump and fired 1 blast into it to destroy its shields before landing on top of it and stomping in its skull. He reloaded as a jackal rushed him from the side and blew off its hand, grabbed its head, and decapitated it with its shield before reloading once more as Brute jumped at him from above. He moved to the side as he blasted it. While the Brute was stunned, he broke its kneecap with a kick, grabbed its arm, and broke its skull with a punch. An elite with a plasma sword rushed him while it was invisible. The Doomslayer pulled out his assault rifle and shot 4 rockets into the elite while dashing out of the way. The elite looked at the Doomslayer while he was invisible and just stared at him before the mini-rockets exploded. A jackal sniper shot at him, but the Doomslayer doesn't stay stationary, so the sniper missed and was taken out by a blast from the Slayer's cannon before he charged it up and blasted a hole through the chest of a Brute. As it collapsed, he ran towards the corpse while pulling out his pump-action shotgun and blasting left and right to take out 2 grunts. A rocket was launched at his torso, and he slid on his knees to dodge the blast before pulling out his pistol and charging it and blasting the head off the grunt. Die! A Brute yelled as it jumped down at him. The Doomslayer sidestepped him and pulled the Brute to the side of him, and Linda took down the Brute's shields as the Slayer charged his pistol and blew off its head while pulling out his rocket launcher and sending it into a perch of jackals, killing 2 of them as the 3rd fell down. As it recovered, he and up to it, grabbed it by the head, and slammed it into a rock. A chieftain ran at him and swung a gravity hammer at him, and the Doomslayer jumped up to dodge, and the gravity hammer slammed into the tree, breaking the trunk. The Doomslayer pulled out his pump-action shotgun and launched a grenade from it into the chieftain, who was barely affected by it. You are going to need more than that to kill me, the chieftain said as he lifted his hammer above his head and jumped at the Doomslayer as pulled out his chainsaw and cut the head off the hammer as he dashed off to the side. The chieftain stared at his now headless hammer. Oh. The Doomslayer stuck the chainsaw through his stomach and pulled it up through its torso before pulling out and having the chieftain collapse on the ground. The Doomslayer pulled out his plasma rifle and fired it at an elite as to block the shots with their plasma sword. He launched a pulse from it, and it deactivated the sword in the elite's armor, and he blew off its head with a few shots. He looked over and stared at a grunt. The grunt began to scream and began to run away. The Doomslayer chased it as it ran around a large boulder. Try as he might, for some strange reason, the Doomslayer couldn't catch up. Like somehow the grunt had summoned the speed of a god to stay away from him. So the Doomslayer stood still and stepped away from the boulder and watched as the grunt continued to run around and around the boulder before blowing off its head. "So, you do have a sense of humor," Kelly said as Blue Team came up to him. "Rest are dead." He nodded. "Come on, we got more to do." Chapter 11. A foot slammed down onto the back of a brute as they tried to crawl away before the fire from an assault rifle blew several holes through its skull. Master Chief took his foot off his back and kicked the body off the small cliff that they were standing on as they looked deeper into the Valley of Stone. He looked behind him and watched as Blue Team sat down as they had taken out all Covenant forces within the area. Doomslayer continued to stand, his double-barrel shotgun locked and loaded. The team looked all around at each other as they checked and reloaded their guns. They had to have killed over 200 Covenant soldiers since they landed, and it was very unlikely that their numbers were anywhere depleted. "How many more of them do you think we have to kill before they give up?" Kelly asked while waving a pistol around. "You've got 4 Spartans, and him, practically bitch-slapping them. They don't surrender. The last time they did, John had to kill their leaders and set off a halo. Even then, the truce didn't last very long." Frederick reminded her. "So unless we got one of those hiding in the infinity somewhere, I doubt that any of that is going to happen." "Hey, Doom Guy," Linda called over. "You got a halo?" He looked up at her and shook his head. "I'm not talking about being holy. A halo is basically a weapon that can destroy solar systems if need be." He paused, then continued to shake his head. "No on both fronts then," Kelly answered. "Is everyone loaded?" John asked. "We should keep moving. There should be a small outpost to the west of here. We take that out, and the main force should be charging shortly." The Doomslayer rolled his shoulders and walked towards the outpost. He wished he could run, but these Spartans didn't seem to like that all that much, seeing that they only ran outside of combat. Even then, they were still kind of slow to him. He thought people with such long legs would be able to move faster than that. After a minute or so of light jogging did the team begin to run at a speed that he was okay with. It only took about 20 minutes to reach the outpost, and only about the same amount of time to clear it out. This was getting too objective for him. They had a goal, of course, but didn't do their way. It was like they were going down a checklist of what to do. Too robotic, too cinematic for his taste. These were the thoughts that went through his head as he sat on top of a corpse on the lookout tower of the outpost. With him, it was just mark the target and kill it. Anything that got in your way, kill them too. These people need tactics and time, though, even though they had more firepower on that flying city of theirs than even he possessed. "Doomslayer," John said as he came up and stared at him as well. The Doomslayer looked at him. "You finding this odd too?" He nodded. John looked around. Linda sent out the signal. Locke's team is done on their side as well. We drew away a good portion of their forces. John looked over at the Slayer. "But it doesn't seem right. Too easy. All our scans told us exactly what was here. When does that ever happen?" The Slayer looked at his head and shook it lightly. John returned the gesture with a nod. "It doesn't. But it seems that our forces are going to be past the Covenant forces in about 20 minutes. John told him. The Doomslayer straightened up abruptly. John looked at him, and his eyes went wide behind his visor. "It was." He turned on his comm. "Linda, tell them to pull back. Now. It is a trap. I repeat, a trap." "All right, John," Linda replied. A few moments later, and she came back with a slight nervous tone to her voice. "It isn't sending. They must have just turned on a jammer. I don't understand, John. They were practically mowing down the Covenant." Doomslayer stood up abruptly and ran past John and smashed through the window and landed on the ground 30 feet below and began to sprint off. "Blue team." Doomslayer just headed off to assist the main force. "We need to follow now," John ordered them as he began to jump down the stairs. "What? Why?" Kelly demanded. "Because he knows what the hell is about to happen." In the Covenant Control Center in the center of the valley stood an elite cloaked in darkness as he stared through his own eyes at the battlefield as it was littered with hundreds of corpses of his brethren, of his soldiers. And he smiled a wicked smile as the ground began to break apart around several places on the battlefield. From it came out a blood-red fog and formed tumor-like things as they collected together above ground. From them oozed damned and accursed power, seeping into the bodies of the fallen. They slowly began to rise as their flesh and bones twisted, broke, and reshaped into horrid reflections of what they once were. The elite smiled and in his new voice said, "Let's see how they deal with this." Chapter 12. Roughly 24 miles from where the outpost that Blue Team just cleared raged a hellish fight. In the strongest sense of the word hellish. The corpses of man and alien burned with crimson energy as they walked. Legs that were once broken now stitched themselves back together with gross results. The result being a mangled tangle of flesh, metal, and blood. All the same, they walked and ran with these. Flesh overtook the alien's armor as it locked the armor into the flesh. Overgrown, infected, cursed flesh graphing the pieces of metal into their bodies. Their bodies mutated into freakish designs of what they once were. That was saying a lot for the flesh that they held before. Their weapons becoming part of their arms as their flesh sealed them to their bodies. All the same, they moved forward, shooting and killing all that was not like them, save the Covenant that they now fought beside. Through the Stone Valley Marines fired randomly into the demonic Covenant, blow off arms and legs, but they continued to come at them. As a Marine reload, what was once a grunt ran at him and tackled him to the ground. Its fingers then began to claw at the Marine, ripping apart his face and chest while he screamed. A fellow Marine shot his shotgun into the back of the demon grunt, blowing off its fin, and only then did it pause. The gas that it once had to breath poured out from the wound almost as much as the blood that flowed. It walked towards the Marine, who then put 2 shells into its chest and face to stop it. Fuck, 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 he said as he breathed hard. A carbine rifle shot went into his lower leg, and he fell to the ground as a jackal stood in a tree. It seemed to chuckle as a transformed human walked up behind him. He turned around to face the faceless creature. Fuck. The creature bit into his neck and pulled away a sliver of his neck. He collapsed out of the pain as the creature swallowed. It then bit into the other side of his neck and did the same, all the while he still lived. Then it bit into his forehead. Only then did he finally die. After he was dead, the creature got back up and began to walk jaggedly toward the other living Marines as lasers, needles, and bullets flew through the air. A man got his arm ripped off by one of the demon-turned Spartans before it ripped off his head with a roar. A brute turned ran at a warthog and jumped onto its gun and ripped the gunner practically in half before ripping the top part of the driver's head off, leaving a flapping jaw. The warthog hit a boulder and flipped forward and crushed the brute underneath. A Marine sniper head was blown off by a jackal sniper, fall backward, and leaving his flank open to allow other possessed to come up and kill the 3 other Marines that was with him. A group of turned Marines jumped onto a Spartan as a possessed jackal shot at his back. He fell to the ground and a possessed elite with a plasma sword stabbed him through the chest before running forward, the blade dragging through the Spartan and cutting his head in half. This carnage was everywhere as the Marines were trapped between the possessed and the Covenant. Trapped between a rock and a bigger rock was the situation. What was the human saying? A brute asked one of his fellow brutes with a chuckle as they stood next to a lip of a cliff about 20 feet tall. They were about half a mile from a large opening where there was a large amount of fighting. Where there were trees coming out of the stone. Like fish in a barrel? Yeah. The other brute said, and the 2 of them connected their forearms together with a laugh. Then from the lip that they stood under there was a sound of a plasma pistol going off. A second later the headless corpse of a jackal splat in front of them. What the? 500 pounds of pist of titanium and hellish metal then fell on top of one of the brutes and stomped its head into the stone earth. The second brute pulled up its mauler, and the Doomslayer pushed its elbow up and had the barrel go into jaw of the brute before forcing the brute to pull the trigger, blowing off its own head. The Doomslayer then took the mauler and ran forward. A possessed grunt turned to him, but before its head was halfway turned its face was blown off, and before the body hit the ground he came up to it, activated a grenade on it, and kicked the body about 10 feet into a ground of grunts. An explosion later they were all dead. Without looking he shot twice off to the side as 2 possessed jackal ran at him. One of the possessed jackals with an energy shield shot at him. He ran around the shield, dashed in, and grabbed the edge of it while putting the end of the mauler on its elbow and blowing it off. As it reeled back he blew off its head. He then ran at a brute as he shot at him. He blocked all shots with the shield, and once he got up to the brute, he destroyed its shields with 2 shots. The brute roared before the Doomslayer kicked it in the stomach, and while it was bent over he wrapped his arm around the brute's neck and fell backwards into a boulder to smash its skull in. The shield was now red, and a possessed jackal with a carbine rifle shot at him off to the side. He ran around and threw the shield like a frisbee and decapitated it. As the shield passed through its neck it vanished, leaving only a severed arm. While running a hunter charged him. He jumped over it with a double jump, but when he landed it slammed its shield arm into him, and he was sent flying into a tree. He shook his head and rolled off to the side as it sent a massive blast into the tree that he was just at. The Doomslayer rolled his shoulders and reached into his warp pack and ran at the hunter. As he dodged another blast he pulled out his chainsaw. With a single pull it came to life as the hunter jumped at him. He spun around to the side of the hunter and had the teeth go into the exposed flesh of the hunter and had it rip and tear straight through it, cutting it in half. The second hunter came at him and knocked him back into a gore next as it let hell's energy seep into the world around him, which kind of pissed him off even more so. He pushed himself up and looked around and saw he was surrounded by at least 50 possessed within a 20-meter radius. One of the brutes chuckled as they aimed their spike repeater at him. Then something happened. The energy coming out of the nest began to form near him, into a sort of red sphere almost. This made all of the Covenant and possessed pause. He pushed himself slowly up straight before jetting out his left fist and punching the orb. The red energy flowed through his suit, and after a moment, he had sort of crimson mist coming off of his armor. He jerked his neck carefully to each side as he put away his chainsaw. He brought his fists to each other and cracked his knuckles. He slowly walked forward and the possessed beings began to jerk back and cower a bit. The brute that was aiming at him also felt his aim being shaky. "Oh, shit," the brute whimpered. Then the Doomslayer dashed in. Chapter 13. Shoot the son of a bitch. A brute yelled as the Doomslayer leaped through the air and into a brute, tackling it into the ground, and with a single punch broke through its shields and skull. Several shots from a plasma pistol hit his side as he got up before he dashed at the two possessed jackals that shot at him. He broke one of their shields with a backhand, and with the same hand swung it around and wrapped it around the jackal's throat as he kicked the other's shield with enough force to send it flying into a tree. He squeezed a little harder and decapitated the jackal while running into the other jackal again, and with a dropkick slammed its body between the tree and shield, crushing it. A jackal shot down at him from a perch in a tree, and he dodged before running at the tree, double jumping up a bit before kicking off the tree and grabbing the jackal off the perch and coming down to the ground with it and splatting its head on the stone floor of the valley. A grunt with a rocket launcher shot at him, and he jumped over the blast and reached the grunt a moment later and ripped off its arm and grabbed the launcher with one hand and used it like a bat to swat the grunt away as its head exploded upon impact. An elite with a pulse rifle shot at him from the side and hit him a few times before the Doomslayer began to run slightly crouched at the elite, dodging shots as they came. As he reached the elite jumped off to the side. While its feet were off the ground for a moment, the Doomslayer grabbed its ankle, or its equivalent, and swung the elite over his head with both arms and slammed it into the ground. With a yank, he pulled the elite to him, and he stopped onto its spine, snapping it like a twig. The hunter from before ran at him and swung its shield at him, and he dashed off to the side to dodge before grabbing its arm and putting his legs over its body and slamming onto the ground while pulling and twisting its arm. A moment later, it ripped off. The hunter's gun hand attempted to grab its stump now before the Doomslayer used the shield to cut off its head. A brute the dual-wielded spike launcher shot at him, and he simply ran through them and stomped on one of its knees to break it before grabbing its head and ripping it off. He tossed it at a group of jackals, and as they shrunk away in fear, he flanked them, ripping one's torso open after thrusting his hands through it. He then grabbed another and ripped off its arms while kicking it in the chest. The last he swung with a backhand with such force that its head exploded. A brute tossed its weapons to the side and jumped at the Doomslayer and punched him 3 times in the head, each one pushing the Doomslayer back a bit. As the brute paused, he looked down at his now broken knuckles as the Doomslayer then dug his fingers into the brute's stomach and flipped him over his head and had its head smash into the stone floor. A suicidal grunt ran at him with about half a dozen sticky grenades activated on its body. Just as it reached him, his fingers dug into the grunt's face, and he spun around with it before throwing it into the trunk of a tree that had several jackals positioned in it. Half the trunk was destroyed, and he ran into it and jumped into it with a punch, and the tree collapsed. As it fell, the screams of the 5 jackals and the yell of a brute as the tree fell on top of him filled the air. Another elite ran at him with a plasma sword, and he slid under it while kicking it in the crotch. When he got to the other side, he jumped over it and smashed its head into the ground with a stomp. He kicked up the handle of the plasma sword and activated it and threw it through a brute and 2 jackals as they stood too close together. Never pausing as he did, he grabbed a grunt's fin and ripped it in half. A possessed group of jackals shot at him as they had their fingers digging into the bark of 5 different trees. He jumped up at one and jabbed his hand through its chest and had his fingers go into the wood as well before jumping off that tree and repeating the process till their bodies hit the floor shortly before his landing back on the floor of the valley. He dashed into another jackal and slashed its skull with a flying knee. A brute with a mauler leaped at him, having 3 shots hitting into the Doomslayer's body. The brute got too close, however, and the Slayer was able to break its forearm with a squeeze before yanking the brute down and headbutting him. Then again, and again, and again, till fragments of its skull and brain were splattered across his visor. He let the corpse drop to the ground as red mist continued to come off his body. A single blast from a plasma pistol hit the side of his head, making his head react with a tilt in the opposite direction. His head then slowly turned to the origin of the shot and found a singular grunt. The Doomslayer locked eyes with the grunt as it lowered its arms to mimic his stance. The Slayer lifted his right arm up as he extended 2 fingers and put them to his chin. The grunt mimicked with its pistol. The Doomslayer jerked away his hand. What was his plan? Frederick demanded as they walked into the last traceable position of the Doomslayer. He can't be that far, Linda observed as the past 2 dead brutes. See? As Blue Team walked into the area, they saw that there was no life. Only blood and death all around them. Corpses of both men and Covenant littered the ground, each one torn apart brutally, many of both having become possessed by Hell's corruption. They then passed a hunter that was cut in half, and they all paused at that appearance. Damn, Kelly said as John squatted down next to it. Well, Linda was right. He cut it in half, with a chainsaw by the looks of it. John observed. Yeah, he is one of those if you didn't know. Frederick stated. He was right about all this. John continued. They let us come through them easily. The corpses of whatever we killed would be revived and would attack us from behind. Trapped between the Covenant and the possessed, we were slaughtered. Hey look, Linda said with a slight gesture, and they looked over and found the Doomslayer as he carried the corpse of a soldier on his shoulder before tossing it down onto one of the 5 piles that they saw. Blue team walked over to him as his back was turned and his helmet was off. When they approached, however, he kicked up his helmet that was off to the side and slid it back on. "Hey, Doom guy," Kelly said as they got close. He looked up at them and rolled his neck in annoyance before walking away with a gesture for them to follow. "Where are we going?" "To keep up the fight." Chapter 14. Okay, before I start this chapter 1, wanted to clarify that the "to keep up the fight" line was supposed to be spoken by John. Whenever I don't put a underscore said after a line, I do it to show that the person to previously talk was the one speaking. Sorry, we'll stop doing that. Anyway, enjoy. "You killed a lot of them back there," Kelly said toward the Doomslayer, as the team continued on jogging after killing another group of Covenant and Possessed, not being allowed to stop. They had been moving like that for the past half hour, trying to find the main body of soldiers, but they simply found more and more bodies. The jingle of their tags echoed after they bounced off the Slayer's armor. Must have been about 50. The rest of the team had several tags as well, but he always got to the bodies before them. The Doomslayer simply nodded as they continued on. Kelly from inside her helmet shifted her lips out of annoyance. "Don't say anything if you are an idiot," she said as she did her best to imitate it a third grader's. Without missing a beat, the Slayer pointed over his shoulder with his thumb at John, who had remained quiet for the majority of the time. Linda chuckled for a second. "He isn't wrong," Linda said. Frederick shrugged in agreement. Kelly rolled her eyes. John didn't really care. The Slayer remained in front of the group like normal. After all, he was faster than any of them, which allowed the other 4 to just think for a bit to themselves, as they almost feared that he could read their thoughts. All the while the 4 of them shared the same thought. How did he kill all of them? They all wondered. They understood that he was fully capable to kill a massive number of enemies by himself. Hell, John could almost relate being a one-man butcher shop. That wasn't the question. They saw the bodies and saving a few each, and every one of them seemed to have been torn apart by some sort of beast. But no such creature existed, right? Limbs ripped off of bodies. Head torn in half. Torso parted like some sick and twisted door. Nothing had that kind of raw power. Not even this man. If it was this man after all, it would be like if he got a power-up. One that let him forget pain and its limitations. But after this power-up would leave him, all his muscles would retract back to normal, causing pain that would be like a muscle sprain or pull, but all across the body and most likely much more intense. Which couldn't be the case because he was still keeping up with Spartans. He jumped down a lip of stone and landed on the floor about 10 feet below and continued onwards with the sounds of the Spartans' heavy boots hitting the floor right behind him. He then began to pick up the pace to force the Spartans to do similar. The Spartans were now almost running while he continued to be well below his top speed. Then they all heard gunfire off to the distance and several dozen screams. "Must have finally found the flank," Frederick said as they turned their direction. The Doomslayer picked up his speed to a level that the only one of them that could come close was Kelly. They came up to a rounded-off area that curved around a slight compacted area, almost like a crater, that was formed most likely due to water flow. All around this divot was Covenants and Possessed, that many of which were firing into the area, as there were several different groups of soldiers suppressed under fire. Though in fact there were many soldiers on the higher ground fighting the Covenant. Towards the center of the divot was a singular warthog with a singular soldier firing out into an advancing horde of Possessed. Linda Purchase, Kelly circle around with the Doomslayer to take out their backline. "Frederick, you're with me," John said. Kelly turned, but the Doomslayer kept running towards the lower ground with the dozen or so soldiers. "What's he doing?" The Doomslayer, as he ran through the lower ground, shot whatever Covenant or Possessed that came across as he ran towards the center of the divot. The soldier at the center pulled out his pistol and began to shoot at a Possessed soldier, but the soldier kept on coming. A tear went down the soldier's face as he put the barrel of the pistol to his chin. He couldn't stand anymore. He couldn't fight anymore. And he would be damned if he just let himself become one of those things. "See you," he said. A pull of a trigger. The pistol broke as a small blast of energy shot through the pistol. He looked over and found the Doomslayer put away his pistol before he ran up to the Possessed soldier, broke its arm before breaking its skull with a punch. He then dashed back to the soldier and pushed the warthog up a bit and jerked his head towards the overturned warthog before grabbing the soldier by the shirt and pulling him under the warthog. "What are you doing?" the man yelled at him. "Leave me to die, you bastard." The Doomslayer looked forward as the advancing horde and shook his head twice before reaching into his warp pack and pulling out the chain gun and spinning the dual barrels. All the Possessed took a step back as they saw him set it into turret mode and cracked his neck. He pulled the trigger and red-hot motherfucking lead shot out, tearing into the standing corpses of the Covenant and Possessed, cutting through them with a sound not that far from grinding meat. He panned the chain gun back and forth as he hit the denser packs of advancements. Limbs were torn off by the rate of fire. Torso ripped open, leaving only wide openings from what was once their bodies. Heads exploded and jaws were dropped in both literal and metaphorical senses. A brute ran at him from the side and he reached into his pack and pulled out his pistol and rattled off a few shots into the brute's skull without lowering the rate of fire in front of him. He must have not let up any sort of fire for a good 20 seconds before the chain gun ran out of ammo. In front of him was a field of corpses. As he put his chain gun back into his warp pack, truly an odd sight. A bolt hit his shoulder that made his arm jerk back as some of the extra armor he wore broke off. He looked into the tree line and saw a jackal holding a rifle. The jackal then dropped the rifle and raised its hands. In return, he showed the jackal his long-range weapon. The railgun did not shin when he pulled it out. It was used too often to be clean, and looked down the sight and blasted away the platform the jackal was on. He then switched its attachment so he could charge it to be even more powerful and used it to blast away brutes and elites that were both on the lower plane with him and the higher plane all the same, letting the smaller blasts hit him. He could take that. He could take whatever they threw at him. A ghost swerved in front of him and tried to shoot at him, but quickly stopped as the driver saw him charging up the attack and tried to dodge before it got killed. The bolt shot through the body of the ghost and exploded. Once again, he was empty and put the rail gun away as he pulled out his assault rifle, as well as his pulse rifle. Wielding one in each hand, he fired forward, mowing down whatever got into his range with steel and plasma. Wow, one of the soldiers said as he lowered his gun as the Covenant continued to put more and more firepower at the Slayer to an extent that he and his group were no longer fired upon. Then so did the other soldiers of his group as they also noticed that they're no longer in danger. The first soldier jerked his gun away. Come on, now's our chance. With that, the group got out of the kill zone. Linda shot another jackal through the skull that was looking away. She followed its line of vision and found the Doomslayer now had a field of corpses in front of him. A possessed jackal jumped over the back of the warthog, and without missing a shot, the Doomslayer pointed his pulse rifle over his shoulder and destroyed the possessed jackal's torso. Holy shit, Linda gasped. More and more of the Covenant and possessed forces attacked him as he stood his ground. Not a single shot missing its mark. A bullet was always hitting something. He was used to firing at high speed accurately, so if he was standing still it was easy not to miss. Besides, there were so many that missing would almost be embarrassing. Epic would be an understatement. He put away his assault rifle and held his pulse rifle with both hands and killed elites with it before it ran out of power. He pulled out his pump-action shotgun and launched an explosive into a ground of grunts before blasting a possessed soldier in front of him in the chest. More and more the possessed began to back away from him. The Covenant saw this, as well as they finally noticed how much of their bodies were now stacking up. The commanding elite then activated his communicator. Send in the Wraith. Let's see how he deals with that. The elite said, and the Covenant tank came out of the woods, breaking down trees as it went before it was on the lip overlooking the divot. Oh shit, Frederick cursed. It's aiming directly at him. He's going to need a big dashed. Kelly began before the words got stuck in her throat as he put away his shotgun and pulled out a gun that was much wider and had more height in the chamber than the rest of his arsenal. Fucking, the elite said as his jaw opened. Gun, the soldier underneath the warthog whispered. The gun lit up with sparks of green lightning coming off it before a massive ball of energy was launched forward, vaporizing whatever was in its path before slamming into the Wraith. The ball exploded with massive streams of energy shooting out from it and connecting with Covenant and possessed and vaporizing them into ashes as the Wraith too exploded. A bolt of energy came straight at his chest, and the elite commander had one thing to say. I'm scared, before becoming a pile of ash. The Doomslayer put away his tool of destruction and knelt down and looked at the soldier and gave a thumbs up. The soldier smiled at the visor of the Doomslayer and held up his own thumb. Chapter 15. Author note. So before I start up this next chapter, want to address one review, or comment, whatever you want to call it. That would be number 131 review addressing the fact that I had the Doomslayer using the BFG 9000 to destroy a Wraith, explaining to me the vast gap between the power of the Doomslayer's arsenal versus the Halo armory. I wanted to address this as I had in the very beginning chapter, saying that he was out of ammo, and the Infinity Armory refitted his weapons with ammunition that it could produce. The only weapon that still fires any sort of ammunition is the BFG, as it runs on Argent energy. Otherwise, all of his weapons have been subsequently nerfed. Now let's get to it. The Doomslayer had taken his helmet and his armor from above the waist off, wearing a black muscle shirt as he laid in a deployable bed inside of a tent. After the disaster that was the push, Infinity had deployed reinforcements and supplies to those on the front lines. In his right hand, he rolled up and down a .50 caliber bullet. He sat up after staring at the ceiling of the tent got a little too boring for him. He rolled his shoulders and looked over as a hologram device popped up to show Vega, who was now trying on a new appearance that was a bit closer to his original. Hello, Doom Marine, Vega said as he rolled his finger of his right hand as he watched. This is truly odd. I doubt any other AI from our time would be able to handle this level of advancement within the short time span available for adaptation I have been available to. The Doomslayer flipped the bullet up into the air and caught it as he pulled out a cigar. He then pressed a small button on the side of the bullet, and the top of the bullet popped off. He pressed it again, and a small fire burned out from it. He lit the cigar and closed the bullet lighter as he took a long drag and breathed smoke out from his nose. The smell of smoke was so familiar to him now that it helped him relax. The cries of pain from a medical tent not that far was also too familiar. He looked over at Vega as he took another drag. Vega then had what appeared to be a small screen form at the end of his hand and began to tap away with it. I find this therapeutic. This action, it allows my thought process to work easier. Vega said, then paused at the Doomslayer, shot him a look that told him exactly how much he cared. People also did not like it when I keep my hands behind my back by experience. I came here to tell you something. Something about the Spartans, actually. More smoke left his nostrils as he glared. I see I have worn out my welcome. A later time. After finishing the cigar, the Doomslayer got out of the tent to go for a walk around the post. As he walked, several other Marines would gesture to him, to whoever they were standing with, a waving at him, and other giving him thumbs ups. The reports of what he did on the front lines to save a single soldier has already spread throughout the forces. Even the Spartans were impressed by the reports. Then once again there were a few Spartans and Marines claiming that any Spartan could have done what he did if they simply had the weaponry. He was just pulling a trigger. What made that so special? As he walked into the command tent, he found several commanders and the blue team gathered around a hologram display of their current position. By all account, they were only a few miles before meeting the center of the valley, but the issue with that was simple. Each inch would drag them deeper and deeper into the belly of the beast. Whatever they killed, with the only exception being those they utterly tear apart, would rise up again as a demon with more and more frequency as they got closer to the main source of this event. This is exactly what they were discussing as they overlooked the map. Frederick crossed his arms as the Doomslayer walked in. Well, despite the ever-increasing shit show that we will be marching into, I think we push through. Sarah Palmer said as she moved the holomap to another checkpoint. This is the last thing preventing us from getting to it. Thanks to the data we have gathered, thanks to the VGA AI and field scans, we have been able to determine that there is another portal right here. A small one. A display of Captain Lasky showed him grabbing his chin, before pointing at it after a moment of thought, poking holes before ripping it all open, making it easier. The captain said, and several commanders agreed. Sarah Palmer shrugged with one shoulder and gestured back to it. This one, when it opened, caused that second wave of demonic revival. The next hole could be here off of assumption, she said as another marker appeared on the map between the first hole and the newest one. More likely, however, another marker appeared past the first marker, so it was now the one in the middle. That's not good, Captain Lasky said as he gestured to the furthest point, the second possible hole opening. If it's the furthest point, we become too disconnected. No backup, no cover fire. Whoever goes there would be completely isolated. Sir, the Master Chief said as he slid on his helmet and stepped. We'll go. Send the majority of the force to the second hole. Blue team will head to the second point. We'll deal with whatever happens. Not alone, Captain Lasky said as he crossed his arms. The way I see it, we send half of our deploying force to the second opening. A quarter to point A where the less likely opening will accrue. The rest with blue team with point B. It's not a good plan, but it's the best we got. Actually, Roland said as he appeared. We've got another issue. Cortana knows where we are. He changed the map to one showing the system they were in and several others. He pointed to the closest one to them. Right here. Most of our systems are off right now, so she can't find us this second, but she will find us. John shifted his shoulders, and the Doomslayer looked over at him before looking back at the map. His muscles tightened as he was now starting to get pretty annoyed. This planning didn't mean much to him. He took out the cigar from his mouth and held it between two fingers, as he was now just starting to glare at those in the tent. How long? John questioned. At least 4 days. At most 6. Roland said as he turned to face John. Then we will be stuck between a realm of ancient evil and an armada of the most advanced weaponry in the history of the galaxy. Captain Lasky said, as he slouched over a little. Let's say 3 days. Tomorrow we move out, and let's say we manage to complete each and every objective the same day. Then the next day we take out the main portal in the same day. 1 day to get out of here with half the crew injured or out of commission, in a ship that isn't fully repaired. Or we could jump right now. Leave a signal that draws Cortana here. Let here kill whatever comes out of the portal. Sarah Palmer answered. Everyone looked at her. Roland thought for a second and nodded. We could, Roland answered. Vega appeared next to him. Or an alliance would form. Both hate humanity and life. Best case scenario, they come to a stalemate. Cortana might be advanced, but she doesn't know how to close the portals. Only I have that information. We can't keep losing men with the risk that Cortana will rip us apart from behind. Locke said with his team standing behind him. Blue team stared him down. John looked at Lasky. Sir, we have to agree with Vega. We've come this far. Retreat is not possible at this point. It is completely an option. Olympia Vale shot out. We can't rely on the skeptical information given to us by an AI from several centuries ago. You would rather have an insane one then? Vega questioned. Captain, John asked, looking at Lasky as he grabbed his forehead. The crunch of a cigar getting stomped on was muffled under all of the argument. We fight. Yeah, we can't risk an alliance. Worse yet, she doesn't even stop with the hell portal. We're going to finish this. Captain Lasky told everyone. The Doomslayer turned away from everyone and walked out of the tent. First thing tomorrow, we move out. Chapter 16. Blue Team and the Doomslayer walked through a flat plain of this canyon. A ridge was just about 70 meters ahead of them as a steam went towards it and fell off. Bodies and body littered the ground, staining the stone and dirt crimson and blue and green from the blood of both men and alien. But with Blue Team leading, the amount of Covenant blood was significantly larger than human. In fact, not a single other soldier of the 3 Marine teams they brought along with them had died yet. So they still had 20 men with them, including the Doomslayer and Blue Team themselves. They weren't given any sort of vehicle as to reduce the chance of getting found, and the Spartans were forced to move much slower than they wanted due to the other soldiers. Doomslayer almost seemed to be moving in slow motion due to the extremely low motion, like it was near impossible for him to actually retrain himself. 2 soldiers walked beside each other behind the Doomslayer, one with an inquiring look on his face before he turned to the other. "So, ever wondered why we're here?" he asked. "Like meaning of life or why we are here on this fucked up planet?" The other soldier replied, "Second, because we got shot down by these Covenant bastards, and now we gotta deal with this demonic shit. Headed to the point where another hell hole is gonna open up and close it before a full-on portal opens up." "Then why is he here, you think?" the first said, gesturing to the Doomslayer with his rifle. "No idea. They literally found him floating in outer space in a sarcophagus or whatever. All that anyone knows is that he's stronger than a Spartan and has the universe's largest rage boner for all demons." The second answered, "He probably only killed the Covenant originally because they looked like demons." "Stronger than a Spartan?" the first chuckled, almost nervously. "You sure?" "Hey, I didn't believe it either. But I've seen some helmet cam footage of the guy. He rips Covenant forces apart with his bare hands. Also, some people say he is even faster than Spartan 087. By a good amount at that." "The rabbit? No way." "Yeah way. If you could combine all members of Blue Team into one person, I bet you would get something like him." The second said. Then the two of them paused for a moment as they saw that the Doomslayer had stopped moving. They feared he was angry from what they were talking about. He lifted up his left hand and pointed to where his ear would be under his helmet. "Oh," the first exclaimed. "All of our radios are on still, aren't they?" "Yes," Kelly replied before she turned off her radio. Chuckles erupted throughout the teams. The Doomslayer rolled his neck as the body language equivalent of an eye roll before he moved forward. He almost seemed to be counting every minute, maybe every second, that he wasn't killing something. That number must be relatively small. The amount of demons that he had torn apart would have been smaller across the many decades that he had been the blight of hell. He looked over at the Blue Team that he was now keeping a good distance from as they began to go up the slope of a hill. He was slightly ahead of everyone as he clutched his assault rifle in his hands, his left hand curling and uncurling from the underside of the barrel. He stepped onto the forearm of a dead grunt and broke it as he passed over it. The blue disc symbol of VGA appeared on the heads-up display of the helmets of Blue Team. The outpost where the next hell tier will appear is roughly over that ridge, approximately 135 meters before non-assisted visual can be made. Vega spoke to all members of the Blue Team. "How long before assisted visual can be made?" Linda asked. "Issue is of angle 058. Vega spoke. "It will be better understood once on top of the ridge." The Blue Team joined the Doomslayer as he stood on ridge, just a bit back so nothing could see him if they looked up. Frederick walked up and found his right arm go slack as it held onto his assault rifle, having it dangle at his side. Several other soldiers noticed why his stature of disbelief. "Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me," he exclaimed as he looked down the rigged cliff side as the stream fell through the air for nearly 600 meters before going to the gulch floor below, where a Covenant outpost was set up with several different sniper towers set up around the main complex. An odd red tint to the existence appeared about 300 meters below. They were getting ready to punch another hole. "Vega, why didn't you tell us we were going around to a dead drop?" Aerial pictures of landscape cannot differentiate between idents or extrusions of the landscape, as well as having the thermal and energy scans of the area show that this side was the least protected. "Sonar was out of the picture for what reason?" Linda asked. "Dampeners," Vega replied. "It doesn't matter." John told them. "Hold long to get down from here." 11.07 seconds. Vega replied. "If he had a physical body, the members of this platoon would be glaring at him." "Humor is something I discovered dashed." "How long?" John repeated. "Climbing down would most likely take 112 minutes. Spartans only would take 47 minutes. Vega told him. "Using your boosters, however, you would about to take roughly 27 seconds if properly timed. Gliding would not be possible here. It would involve direct descent. I have seen records of descents much greater performed by Fire Team Osiris." "What about the Marines?" "They will parachute. Every other one brought one as a precaution," Vega said. John looked back and saw that to be true as they were prepping their chutes. "John," Kelly said calmly. "You said this was to be expected." The master chef complained. "Did I?" Vega replied. "John," Kelly called out again. "What about the Doom Marine?" "I think 087 is about to tell you." "John," Kelly yelled. "What?" he exclaimed as he turned to her, and she pointed sharply behind her. John looked over the ridge and saw the Doomslayer digging his heels into the face of the cliff as he practically surfed the nearly non-existing slope. Before he jumped and landed on a small lip of stone before jumping again and sliding down the hill again with one leg bent and the other in front of him as he kept one hand flat against the stone face. 22 seconds before he reaches the bottom. Vega answered, I recommend going if you don't want to lose to him again. Kelly jumped over the edge of the cliff and was followed by Linda, Frederick, and then Master Chief. Fear of heights. I've fallen from orbit, he said, putting his rifle on his back. So no, but never into hell. Chapter 17. Author note. Thank you all for continuing to like this story. To address the issues as brought up by Ferox Pretorius, who I thank for voicing his concern. 1. Speed. From what I know is what I can look up, the fastest Spartan alive is Kelly, whose supposed top speed is roughly 38.5 miles per hour on average. John was able to move nearly 65 miles per hour for a short burst, but tore a tendon because of it. The Doomslayer in his original games was able to outrun his own rockets, which put him above 50 miles per hour. Even in the newest game, he still moves over 20 miles per hour constantly despite moving much slower than he could in previous games. But if you read all the testaments, it seems that those games are at least still partially canon to the series. So I'm keeping his speed to about 45 to 55 miles per hour, with the whole thruster thing as they fall through the sky and onto the mountain, which fell about 5,000 meters and onto a snowy plain. That was with thrusters and falling, and they were allowed to go that fast due to going onto a snowy plain and their armor. But falling at the same speed straight down onto stone would not be that smart. 2. Strength-wise, I keep them about the same level of strength. But the Spartans have never ripped limbs off their opponents, especially not at the same frequency that the Doomslayer does. So to an observer, he is stronger. Also, slight spoiler if you don't know the lore of Doomslayer. I recommend watching In the Mind of the Doomslayer if you want to know what lore I'm going off. In Doom 2016, the testaments tell of a legendary Hell Warrior that was meant to challenge the Doomslayer. The two fought, and he killed it as he does. But you see, that demon was no mere Hell Knight or Baron of Hell. No, this champion demon is that skull you jump through when going through hell. Yeah, he killed that thing. Without a BFG. 3. Also with the whole personality traits of Blue Team. I went off their wiki sums a lot and kind of turn it up to 11. Because, yeah, they are all stoic and somber, etc. Which would make it so boring to write. Because 95% of interactions of Blue Team would be nod, roll shoulder, nod, shake head, nod, hand wave. I kept John like that, but otherwise, yeah. Putting a guy that never talks in a room of people that hardly talk would not be that interesting. Thank you for that. I now have a Twitter if you want to shoot me any story requests. Just look for Final SD or something. Anyway, enjoy. A few grunts hung around the pond that formed from the falling steam from the cliff. The red tint of the area around them also changed the color of the water, from a light green color to an almost black-purple color. One grunt continued to poke the water, ignoring everything else. A fall rock fell and hit one of the other 3 grunts in the head and knocked it out. The other 2 laughed at their fallen friend while the 4th just kept poking the water with a stick, its needle gun sitting off to the side. Following the rock fell the Doomslayer, who smashed his boots into the back of one of the laughing grunts and breaking most of its bones as he collapsed onto it and into the dirt. The other laughing grunt pointed his plasma pistol at the Doomslayer and charged it up. The Doomslayer paused and waited for a second as it became fully charged. Die, the grunt said in the little English it knew. The Doomslayer pushed its arm downwards with the end of his rifle and had it blow off the head of the knocked-out grunt. It paused and looked at the end of its gun. Oh. The Doomslayer lifted up his rifle with one hand and pulled the trigger and sent a single bullet into its skull. The 4th grunt continued to play with the water. It pulled back its stick and found that it had practically melted. The Doomslayer walked up behind it, unlatched a tube to its methane tank. The grunt reached back out of panic, and the Doomslayer kicked the grunt into the water, where it sank into the acidic water with a scream as its flesh boiled and popped under the water. Linda landed relatively close by to him and took in the area before looking back at him. When did you become subtle? She asked him over the comms in a low voice. He looked back at her and shrugged. The rest of Blue Team landed shortly after and looked around in the red-tinted bubble of the area. Frederick and Kelly took up positions, and the Doomslayer grouped up next to John as they took up position behind some boulders. Linda looked through the scope of her sniper rifle and shared the feed with the rest of the team and marked what looked like several generators that fed into the main building. On top of the structure was a large device that was shooting out a beam that started to fracture the closer it got to the top of the bubble of hellish energy they were currently in. Vega, John called out. Vega turned back on. Those generators are powering the quote-unquote drill that you see there. The AI answered, focusing the energy as you put it, to punch the hole into hell to let the tear fully open. So take out those generators and turn off the drill? Linda questioned as she took aim. Yes. However, a rapid release of energy from the result their destruction would cause a similar result. More grotesque result. Explain. Frederick asked. When it was such a desire back on Mars by a woman named Olivia Pierce, such a rabid opening caused the cease of life over 99.5% of our faculty's employees, with a 64% possession and demonic mutation rate, some dying from the release, most dying from the possession and or demonic presence. Vega told them, "The Covenant do not desire such a result. Cut the supply off then." Frederick said, then looked at John and made a few gestures of his hands that John completely understood. "Doomslayer, we are going to need you to flank," he said, turning to find the Doomslayer still standing there. John blinked a bit, and Kelly looked over and raised an eyebrow. "Thought there would just be a dotted outline of him," she said. The Doomslayer almost seemed to roll his eyes. "I need you to take down those towers," Master Chief said, pointing to the jackal nests. The Doomslayer pulled out his rocket launcher. Master Chief paused for a brief second and decided not to protest. He held up a hand up and Blue tensed up and got ready to go. With a closing fist, the 5 of them attacked. Frederick ran straight forward and switched to his shotgun as he made a beeline for the closest elite. Linda aimed her sniper rifle and pulled the trigger, the bullet passing over Frederick's shoulder and missing his head by less than 3 inches. The bullet slammed into the elite's shields and shattered them. Before the shields on the rest of it fell, Frederick let loose a shotgun blast into the back of its head to explode its skull. A jackal on top one of the buildings aimed its carbine repeater at Frederick's head. The scope of the rifle exploded as another sniper round passed through it and into the jackal's skull and out the other end. John and Kelly used concentrated fire to destroy the shields of an elite and brute. The brute yelled and jumped at the 2 of them as the elite fell back. Master Chief didn't bother looking as he continued to rush the elite. Kelly slid forward as the brute jumped overhead and pulled the trigger to her battle rifle 3 times. Once in the head and twice in the chest. The brute hit the ground dead, and almost at the exact same time it hit the ground, Kelly rose back up to her feet to pull off a headshot on a grunt off to the left as Chief put 10 rounds into the chest of the elite before aiming off to the right to cut down a grunt that was out of cover. The Doomslayer jumped into the beam in the center of one of the jackal lookout towers and activated his boosts so to be propelled higher than normal. The 3 jackals looked up at him as he launched down 2 rockets and turned them into bloodstains. He aimed at the next tower about 30 yards away and fired several rockets into the platform to disrupt the 2 jackals as they aimed their pulse rifles. This caused the platform to explode. He paused for a second to look at his rocket launcher and the platform he was standing on. A ghost was going to pass his tower as it was being driven by an elite. He aimed his rocket launcher and locked 5 different rockets onto it and pulled the trigger as he jumped off the platform. The rockets caught up to the ghost and caused it to explode and launching the shieldless elite into firing range of Kelly and Master Chief. Kelly put a single shot into its skull and turned her rifle towards another group of jackals. Master Chief dodged a swing from a brute's type 25 grenade launcher. He swung his rifle off to the side of him to kill a grunt that was running from the side. With his rifle being fired with his right hand, he reached down and grabbed his magnum and brought it up sharply into the brute's chin and pulled the trigger 3 times and kicked the corpse off the brute onto the ground before putting the magnum back onto his thigh as he grabbed his rifle with both hands and blew off the hand of a shield jackal as he ran at it. He pushed its shield off to the side and unloaded more of the clip into its chest. An elite ran at him invisible from the side before it was cut in half by a massive pulse blast. Master Chief traced the blast and found the Doomslayer holding his Gauss cannon for a brief moment before he switched over to his pump-action shotgun and charged at another brute. The head of a brute was blown off to the left of the Doomslayer from Linda's rifle. Linda pulled back the action on her rifle and reloaded and panned back over to Frederick as he slammed his shotgun into the head of a brute to crush its skull. Before he had time to reload, another elite rushed behind him. He switched the positioning of his hands and grabbed the end of the shotgun's barrel and swung it like a baseball bat into the head of the elite. The swing broke its shields, but didn't stop the elite from hitting Frederick to the ground. A sniper shot tore through the elite's skull. Frederick rolled off the side and pulled his rifle off his back and mowed down a standing grunt. Master Chief dashed behind a metal box and reloaded high pistol as Kelly shot at the jackals on top of the main structure as they shot down at the 2 Spartans. Just as she went behind the cover, Master Chief came out from behind it and zoomed up and pulled the trigger 4 times to take out the 3 jackals. Off in the distance, another tower exploded and Master Chief and Kelly looked over and found the Doomslayer running back towards them while shooting down any Covenant soldier that got in his vision with his pulse rifle. A grunt threw a sticky grenade at him, and while it was in the air, another grunt was close by. So he pulled out his pistol, charged it, and blew off the grunt's arm and threw the blown-off arm at the sticky grenade that almost followed the same arc it took and blew up with the original thrower, as well as the 2 grunts standing next to him. With another shot from the pistol, the armless grunt had its head blown open. An invisible elite rushed him with an energy sword, and the Doomslayer spun around as he pulled out his chainsaw and cut the elite in half at the waist. Almost directly after this, the other soldiers began to land at the bottom of the cliff, and they finished off the remaining Covenant force guarding the position. How does he spot them so easily? Kelly talked to herself as the Doomslayer nudged the cut in half elite with his foot before shrugging and moving towards the main building. Vega came back on. The Doomslayer's senses are much greater than any sort of detection system. He can spot any cloaked any quite easily. He always has been able to. Vega told her. One of our original theories are that dashed. Shut up, Poindexter. One of the sergeants said over the comms. Let's turn off this laser thing and get the hell out of Dodge. Very well. I would hurry, Vega said as all the soldiers landed. Linda and Frederick were already inside of the building looking for the cables and switches to turn off the generators. The Doomslayer also joined them, hoping that he could just tear a cable out of the floor or something. Why's that? One of the other soldiers asked. There was a sound comparable to that of a sewer system being flushed out and thunder mixing all together before there were thousands of popping sounds all around them. For it's been cut through enough already on this side. They are coming through, Vega stated. Behind one of the last soldiers to get down the cliff, a small portal-like figure appeared behind him, and a red claw launched out and tore off his helmet and most of his skull. The nearest soldier turned toward the red figure as it clawed its way out. A red humanoid-like creature stood there. It didn't seem to have the majority of organs a mortal creature would have, like it was comprised of nothing but muscle, bone, and blood. But everything about its posture and its appearance screamed one thing. It was from hell, and it was hungry. Similar tears began to pop up all over the hellish bubble, and more of these creatures appearing. Along with them, not in nearly the same amount, was a 6.5-foot tall figure that looked like the closest thing to a hell soldier. One arm having hellish energy glowing from it, and its flesh looking like plated white armor. The first imp that clawed through jumped at the second soldier and torn into his torso. Holy shit, Kelly whispered. All Marines fall back into the complex. Now, Mater Chief ordered. The Marines ran as they shot behind them at the demons as they came out of the ether of the world. 10 Marines didn't make it as they were blown or torn apart by the demons. As soon as they got into the complex, they began to barricade the doors and window of the complex. The demons pounding and cutting into the metal with their claws while also bombarding them with argent energy blasts. Vega, update. Now, Master Chief demanded. The red ones are classified as imp. The white ones are razors. Others are coming shortly after. Vega answered. Will cutting off the energy stop it? Master Chief questioned. Your fellow Spartans already have accomplished this. Vega answered. The open will not get bigger, but it will not close. It can't be closed from our side. So we have to fight these guys off before they run out of demons? Frederick said, running up with Linda. I doubt a large amount of their force is behind this opening. On either note, hell is a composite realm, comprised of several different dimensions that it has absorbed. Defeating each and every demon would be quite impossible. Vega answered. All right, everyone take an opening. Heavy armor's in front. Rest is covering fire. Master Chief said while pointing to the Marines. He then gestured to 3 Marines. Doomslayer, cover our south flank with 3. We play smart, we'll make it out of this. Wilco, one of the 3 Marines said as he walked out with other 2. Kelly checked her rifle's clip. Any words of advice from out demon expert? She asked. Demons can recover from most damage, until a large portion of them is blown off, or they remain still for 20 seconds, believe them to be dash. Vega started. A grunt and growl came from behind them. They are rage, brutal, without mercy. You have to be worse. Rip and tear, until it is done. The voice was gravelly and sharp and partially muffled, but everyone heard it. It was not a mistake. The radio was on, which made the voice echo in the room. He had talked. The blue team looked over and saw him fixing his pulse rifle before going towards the south part of the complex. Chapter 18. Hundreds of bullets flew out of the complex as dozens and dozens of argent energy blasts slammed into the metal walls of the building. An imp jumped at a window and got a hole blasted through its chest from Frederick's shotgun. Kelly unloaded shot after shot into a Hellraiser's chest, stunning the demon, but it just seemed to shake it off and continue firing blasts at her opening. Linda shot out and blew off the same Hellraiser's skull, and just like that, 3 more imps came into the same line of shot, 2 of which threw argent energy at the complex as well. Master Chief took cover to reload again and popped back out to shoot at one of the Hellraisers with another Marine's line of fire, and the rapid barrage of bullets tore through its flesh and left a decent-sized hole in its chest that had it collapse to the ground. But just as it hit the ground, another Hellraiser stepped over it and shot into the opening and nailing Master Chief in the shoulder and destroy part of his shields. We are in a barrel, one of the Marines yelled. They aren't even fazed when they see one of their allies die. Linda observed as she loaded on of her last clip for her sniper rifle. Another portal tore open, and a large pitch-black leg stepped out with the rest of its body following. A demon the same height as the Spartans came out, with no eyes and once again no real ability to tell if it had organs or not. Hell Knight, Vega clarified. Its mouth opened up slightly, and it growled low and loud. We need more room. Frederick called out. John, with me. The 2 of them jumped out from different windows, and Frederick ran towards the Hell Knight as it ran at him as well. Frederick unloaded several shots from his rifle at his chest, black blood spurting out from the holes, but not slowing it down that much. He switched back to his shotgun again, and just as he did, the Hell Knight leaped through the air at him. Frederick's eyes went wide as he jumped off to the right as it slammed into the ground where he was standing. He aimed at it, but it was already at him and swinging its arm at him, slamming into the side of his torso and knocking him back several feet and almost breaking his shields. John unloaded half a clip of his rifle into the side of the Hell Knight. As it turned towards John, Frederick blasted its head off with his shotgun before slamming the stock of his shotgun into the head of a leaping imp and stomping on its chest before blowing off its head. John strafed to the side while unload more shots into a Hellraiser, pieces of its white flesh plating breaking off before the bullets finally dug through and cut through its chest. John lifted up his magnum and blew a hole tough the opening he created, and the demon hit the ground. John pointed to his left with the magnum and pulled the trigger 6 times into the head of an imp before reloading his rifle and dodging another blast from a razor. He went behind one of the metal supply cases to finish reloading. An imp leaped down from him and grabbed onto his armor. John swung his left arm into its chest and smashed it into the metal box he was using as cover. He slammed his elbow and forearm into it 5 times as it indented into the box more and more. He and Frederick got closer and almost put their backs together. "You can't stop moving with these things," Frederick said as he reloaded his shotgun. "Last clip for me." "Same," Master Chief replied. He kicked up an elite's rifle as he put his own rifle on his back and cut off the leg of an imp as it rushed him. A sudden yank pulled him away as a massive energy blast was sent over the 2 Spartans. John looked up and found a big fat demon standing not 30 meters away with energy cannons for hands and only one eye. A short demon that looked like to be 80% face began to run at the 2 of them as they were stunned. Master Chief unloaded at its face as it charged, the plating that was its flesh absorbing the damage like nothing. Frederick squatted down a bit as it charged at him and grabbed it by its 2 massive teeth that protruded from its mouth, getting pushed 3 feet back in the process, and slammed it into the ground where Master Chief tore through its softer flesh with the rifle. Frederick stood up and shot at another razor. "What I wouldn't give for a Spartan laser right now," he grunted out. On the other side of the main building, the 3 Marines cleared out a hallway. One was injured, but otherwise they were all right. The Doomslayer being the one to do most of the killing actually. But as the sounds got louder and louder outside, it made it harder to think that taking up any sort of flank would be a good idea. "Come on, guys," the one in the front said as he turned to the other 2 Marines. "Just cover each other and we'll dash." As he spoke, an imp tore through the metal to the side of him and was about to cut through his back. A hand shot out and grabbed the imp by the throat. The imp clawed at the arm, but the metal was stronger than normal steel. Its eyes darted around rapidly as it kicked and throttled before they latched onto the helmet of the Doomslayer. If it was frantic before, now it was terrified, grabbing onto the arm of the Doomslayer and pulling away from the grasp. But the hand would not open. The Doomslayer began to twist his wrist, and the imp fought harder till there was a loud snap, and the imp ceased its movement. "Thanks," the front soldier said. The Doomslayer looked back at him and pointed downwards with his empty double barrel. "Hold this hallway." The Doomslayer nodded and began to walk towards the exit with the corpse of the imp, each step echoing as he walked on the metal floor. Back towards the front, John and Frederick were being pushed back again by more of the Chargers and the Hell Knights. The Marines in the complex were also slowing down their rate of fire, as they too were running low on ammo and lacked the time to pick up the Covenant arms. There was a loud crash off to the side that drew a second's attention from Frederick and John before they focused back on the demons in front of them. But the demons they were supposed to be fighting paused. They all looked over to where the loud sound was. So too did the Spartans for a moment, as well as the Marines. They watched as the Doomslayer walked out of the side exit with the corpse of an imp in one hand and his double-barrel shotgun in the other. A Hell Knight and a Razor were the closest ones to the doors, with a Mancubus 5 meters behind them and an imp off to the side. But yet not a single step or motion was taken towards the Doomslayer. He stopped moving for a moment and tossed the corpse of the imp at the feet of the Hell Knight. Then something happened. They all took a step back. The imp, then the Razor, then the Hell Knight, and then the rest of them moved back by at least a step away from him. Not another portal opened in this silence. No other demon was coming through. Frederick looked around at the demons and swore he saw one with a shaving jaw. He looked back over at the Doomslayer as he opened up his double-barrel shotgun and placed 2 shells into it. Then an imp screamed at the Doomslayer along with many other demons. But it wasn't a war cry. No, Frederick heard similar screams from grunts. In that moment he knew exactly what the Doomslayer was. The ultimate demon slayer. Not just a title. Not just a name. No, that name was a feeble attempt to understand him. And understanding something helps one defeat it. He ripped and tore them apart as he knew it was the only way to know you killed them. He constantly moved because he knew how these demons fought better than anyone else. He carried so many weapons with so much ammo as not to need to pause and look for others. He was their nightmare. John was called Demon to the Covenant. Doomslayer had no other meaning to them. It was rage. It was blood. It was death. And he was pissed. The only reason he stood still at this moment was to let them know who exactly they were dealing with. "Tear him apart," Frederick whispered, and the Doomslayer launched forward. Chapter 19. The Doomslayer charged at the closest Hell Knight and let out a blast from his double barrel into one of its legs before blowing off its head with the second shot. Without slowing, he rushed the nearest razor while reloading and dodged a blast from its arm before shooting its left arm. It staggered back as several chunks of its flesh was torn off from its body with the pellets of his shotgun. He punched it across the face, grabbed its arm, broke it, and punched its head again to shatter the bones of its skull, ripping apart the demon's face with the same punch. He was already running before the body hit the ground. He shot another blast into an imp. While it was staggered, he ran into it and swung his knee into its skull and smashed it into the metal container behind it. A razor shot at him, and he dodged the beams while pulling out his pump-action shotgun and sending an explosive into its chest, blowing off its torso and leaving only behind its legs. Another knight ran at him as he switched the modes on his shotgun and charged it up. He let loose all 3 shots into its stomach while blew a hole straight through the knight's stomach. As it fell over, he kicked its jaw, breaking it, and punching its skull with such force that parts of it exploded. He shot at another razor to stun it before running up to it and breaking its foot with a stomp while pinning it in place before punching its skull off its shoulders. He dug his fingers into its chest and turned the body to block a blast from a cacodemon, the body exploding into a bloody mist. The Doomslayer reached into the warp pack and threw a grenade into its still open mouth, not even pausing to see the explosion. He shot down 3 imps while running before double jumping on top of another razor and blowing off its head before pulling out his chainsaw to cut the arm and head off a knight before switching to his pulse rifle. The plasma from the pulse rifle tore through the flesh of 3 possessed grunts as heat built up. A knight ran up to him, and he released the heat in a massive blast that stunned it. He slammed his forearm into its face before breaking its neck with a kick. A mancubus shot at him as he used his rocket launcher to kill 2 more razors from a distance. He charged up 4 shots from it as he jumped out of the way from another blast and launched it into the mancubus. It got stunned and shoot its head as it charged up another blast. The Doomslayer jumped onto it and grabbed its arm and pulled it back towards the mancubus's skull, so when it released the power it blew off its own head. He put away his launcher as a revenant flew at him. He jumped up and grabbed it by its vest and slammed it into the ground as he pulled out his pistol and charged it up and blew its head off. He ripped off one of its cannons as he kicked up a grenade and hit like a baseball and watched as it smashed into the body of a possessed jackal, which shortly exploded, taking out the 2 others close to it. He tossed the cannon off to the side and tossed a hologram projector behind some cover that several different razors shot at as his image appeared. All the while he flanked them, bullets from his assault rifle cutting into them. He launched the mini rockets into a mancubus as he ran into it and tore off its energy core and shoving it down its throat, not pausing to watch it explode. He kicked up a fallen elite's plasma sword and threw it into the chest of a Hell Knight. The knight groped at the handle of the blade, and the Doomslayer ran up to it and pulled the energy sword up through its torso and up of the Hell Knight's skull. He pulled it up and blocked 3 blasts from a razor's blaster before pulling out his assault rifle and firing it with one hand to tear it apart with red-hot metal. A loud thump drew the attention of the Marines and the Spartans, and they all turned to see a massive 20-foot-tall red demon standing there. A Baron of Hell. The Marines and the Spartans were nearly out of ammo as the thing rushed Frederick and Master Chief. They unloaded their clips into it, but it did not slow. The Baron swung its massive arm downward and slammed into Frederick, sending him into a metal wall that bent behind his weight. He would have been torn in half if not thanks to his shields. The monster must have weighed close to 5 tons to do something so easily. The Master Chief held his arm behind him, and a Marine tossed a shotgun into his hand that he pointed at the Baron's face. The Baron charged at him once more, but the sound of something revving made it slow. Leaping from a tall crate, with a double jump, the Doomslayer came down, holding his chainsaw in one hand, and in the other the plasma sword. He rotated his body twice, once to build up speed, and the second to carve through the Baron. The plasma sword cutting through roughly half of its torso, as his chainsaw cut through the rest of it. When the Doomslayer landed, he was covered in blood, and the Baron fell down in 2 massive pieces. He rolled his neck with muffled cracks coming from the inside of his helmet. He looked down and stared at the plasma blade as it died. He seemed to grunt and tossed the worthless handle off to the side while turning off his chainsaw. The Marines breathed in sharply as they all felt their blood pressure slowly go down. No more demons were coming through. Only smart decision they made that day. Damn, one of the Marines said. Where can I get one of those? Is it expanding? Lasky asked. With no more energy going into it? Unlikely. Opening requires energy from our side. Closing it requires their part. Vega told him. Master Chief nodded. Which will require what? Master Chief asked. Vega remained quiet. Vega. Doing some calculations. Vega answered. Before it required a relic to be in the possession of the Doomslayer. Using it allowed for the well too close. In Lemon's terms, the place in hell that supplies their side with the ability to keep the portal open. It simply can't open the portal itself. And this well, most likely has a new relic that we have to use to close it again? A linchpin? Master Chief asked. Those were the calculations I was going over. The probability that they would use the same process so many years into the future. Vega said. You could almost see Lasky wagging his finger in epiphany. No, there is always an axe. Always a switch. Always a bomb to set off. Lasky said. An axe, sir? Mater Chief questioned. One of my friends has a little boy who loves video games. Lasky stated. Besides, with someone with your level of luck, I think the chances of this linchpin existing is that much more. How do we enter hell? You get close to an epicenter of one of the stronger openings. The opening at the Covenant base will be the most likely the best place to enter from. Vega told the captain. Understood. Chief, the rest of Infinity is ready to take the fight right to these bastards. How's Blue Team and the Doomslayer? Lasky asked. John looked over at the rest of Blue Team. Frederick kept rolling his shoulder, but gave a nod through the pain. Blue Team is able to redeploy, but we will need a second pickup for the Marines. They need to recover back at Infinity. Master Chief told the captain. Copy that. Sending 2 Pelicans ETA 25 minutes. Roger that, sir. With that, he turned off the communication. They needed to end this. Soon. Chapter 20. 26, 27, 28, 29. Kelly counted out loud as the Doomslayer loaded rocket after rocket into his rocket launcher as they were transported in the Pelican. Off to the side, a small generator hummed as it was attached to Gauss cannon, recharging its energy cell. Linda looked over at Kelly as she loaded her .50 caliber bullets into her rifle's clip. What are you doing? Linda asked. Counting how many rockets that thing holds. Kelly answered while pointing lazily towards the Doomslayer and his rocket launcher. Whenever I think he's done, he puts another one in there. Wait, no, he's done. No, I think he's just giving you a confused look. Linda told her as he looked back at them while holding another rocket. The two of them looked away, and he slid 2 more rockets into the launcher. 35 by the looks of it. Frederick said, standing towards the front. He loaded the second rocket in the M41. He looked over at the Gauss cannon as it continued to charge. Why can't we do the same to his other energy cannon? A hologram of Vega appeared in front of the 3 Spartans with his hands held in each other behind his back. Linda loaded the last of her ammunition into her clip and stared at Vega, while the Doomslayer simply took apart his assault rifle and began to clean the different parts. Kelly leaned back against the wall in the Pelican. The BFG 9000 cannot run off of normal plasma energy, as his other weapons are capable of. While those may run of energy either from our world or Hell's, the BFG requires a pure form of Argent energy that even in the realm of Hell is a rarity. What does the abbreviation of BFG stand for? Linda questioned. Big fucking gun. Vega stated. Huh. All 3 Spartans said together. Big fucking gun 9000. Vega stated once more. That's a joke, right? Frederick asked. A weapon capable of wiping out dozens of enemy combatants as well as a tank has to have a more serious name than that. You are correct and incorrect, Spartan 104. Its name was a joking title when originally implemented. After the 5384 trial, it was given such a name for the ridiculousness and radicalness that the weapon continued to demonstrate to our engineers as it continued to be a failure in our hands. So we gave it the name out of the idea that it would never be functional. So the 9000 stands for the trails and redesigns that it went through then? Linda asked. What was so difficult about making your own gun? It actually took 9,273 trials to come to fruition, but 1,000 number makes it sound better. Vega answered. The issue was that the original design was not ours. We found it near the Doomslayer's sarcophagus. In response to his name, the Doomslayer raised a hand into the air and gave a 2-finger salute before going back to work. Elaborate, please. Kelly asked. Certainly. When the UAC went into Hell in one of its first expeditions into the realm, we came across a secured catacomb of sorts. One with enough demonic forces to expel a force thrice the size of all teams we deployed into Hell. But they were unable as all defenses were pointed inwards. They could not manage to expel us as they should have been able. In the center of it all, we found the sarcophagus as well as several sealed-off weapons, most of which too damaged to be in use, but all with an eerie similarity to weapons from Earth. We scanned them and left while taking the only one that seemed to be in some sort of working order, the original BFG. While leaving the catacombs, we witnessed the weapon's power firsthand as we were attacked by a Baron of Hell, which caused the soldier holding it to fire. The Baron was turned to, with a lack of a better term, paste, and the soldier's arm was severely burnt. The weapon was destroyed in its firing, which our president was not quite pleased with, but saw potential. We reverse-engineered the weapon when returning to Mars and continued onwards till its current state. Then who made it? Frederick continued. By the sounds of it, whoever created it had to be a minimum of 500 years more advanced than the rest of the realm of Hell. Indeed. Vega answered, then held up his right hand. We are not currently 24 seconds from reaching our drop point, Vega said before going back into his drive. The Doomslayer pulled him out and hung Vega's drive from his waist before going over the Gauss cannon and putting into his warp pack. The sight was still extremely odd. Master Chief walked from the cockpit into the bay with the rest of them. The enemy base has anti-air and anti-ground weaponry pointed in every direction. Except for up, Linda said as she stood up while pulling back the action on her sniper rifle. Master Chief nodded while picking up a Spartan laser from the crate in the middle of the Pelican. We are 4.5 miles up. Wait for 5 seconds before jumping. John told them while hitting the bay doors to open. He leaned down for a moment and turned a notch on the generator, and it began to hum louder. Why is that? Frederick asked. John then kicked out the generator. Because we're knocking, John said. The Doomslayer walked up while nodded his head slowly, once, twice, 3 times, a fourth, then jumping out of the back with the rest following shortly after. Knocking? That wasn't his style. They were going to break the fucking door down. 2.5 tons of titanium, steel, plasma, snips, snails, werewolf tails, spice, and not much nice fell from the sky. The members of Blue Team fell in perfect sync and using the jets in their armor to steer themselves in the proper positions around where the generator would land, while the Doomslayer had a slightly different way of steering himself. He had his head pointed down towards the ground and his feet pointed back up towards the sky, making it so he would fall straight down onto whatever was directly below him. He continued to hold onto his assault rifle all the same, however. Seeing this brought no worry to the Blue Team, of course. They had seen him do much crazier things than this before. After all, they could survive falls 4 times greater than this without dying. So he could probably do the same with everything considered. About 20 seconds into their fall, another 23 before they land, the Doomslayer continued to fall straight down. What is his landing strategy? Kelly asked over the comms. Land. Frederick answered. He only has a single thrust from his boots. He will pull too many Gs if he slows down all at once. He'll knock himself out if not worse. Kelly said. The Doomslayer looked down, which was technically up, at her and shrugged before returning to normal. 10 seconds left before they landed. 5 seconds ahead of them, the generator fell directly towards what was a defensive structure with about 50 of assorted Covenant forces in and around it. Just before the generator hit it, the Doomslayer flipped upright with the sound of the explosion. The explosion obliterated the structure and sent shrapnel everywhere, sending plates of steel in every which direction, including upwards. Blue Team maneuvered out of the way of the debris, but the Doomslayer used it. He kicked off the first plate that came his way, which slowed his fall as he pushed himself back upwards. He aimed at another piece of metal with a thrust of his boots and jumped off it as well. He jumped from piece of metal to piece of metal till about 50 feet above the ground, when he just allowed himself to fall before giving one final thrust from his boots and landing in the middle of the explosion caused by the generator. Frederick landed on a path coming out of small cave in one of the walls of the gorge and looked at the Doomslayer. That was impressive, he said before he aimed his rocket launcher at a banshee and blowing it out of the sky. As Master Chief landed, 5 elites just happened to be around him. He put the Spartan laser onto his back and switched to his assault rifle. 2 of the elites began to shoot at him with their pulse rifles, and Master Chief shot back at the 2 of them while running to the side. 2 other elites ran at him with their plasma swords drawn and slashed at him. He dodged the first swipe and grabbed the arm of the second one while it slashed. He knocked that elite to its knee while holding its arm with one hand, the other arm pointing his assault rifle at the other elite and pulling the trigger to cause the elite to block with his plasma sword. The other elite ran at him with dual plasma swords. Master Chief threw his rifle at the elite's legs to cause the elite to fumble for a second, which allowed him to pull the magnum from his thigh and shoot into the elbow of the elite that he was holding onto. The elite yelled in pain as the Master Chief moved his hand from the elite's wrist and onto the handle of the plasma sword. The Master Chef rotated his body with the same motion and knocked to the side the swipe from the second elite's plasma sword and pushed the plasma sword into the elite's chest. He pointed over his elbow with his magnum and shot 5 times at the dual-wielding elite, who was forced to block. He pulled the plasma sword out of the chest of the elite and blocked the barrage of shots from the 2 other elites. Before the body fell, Master Chief pulled a plasma grenade off his belt and threw it onto one of the elites that paused when it landed on his body. The explosion killed him and stunned the other rifle elite, allowing the Master Chief the ability to turn back to the dual-wielding elite as he blocked one slash and dodged the other. While blocking a double slash, he shot the elite twice into the stomach that made the elite fall back for a moment, which allowed Master Chief to kick the elite in the stomach, then made the elite fall to his knees, and with one more swing, Master Chief cut the elite's head in half. The last elite recovered and Master Chief threw the plasma sword at the elite, which cut through its chest before the blade finally died. A ghost came directly at him at full speed, and he kicked up one of the fallen plasma swords and reactivated it and cut upwards just as the ghost reached him, cutting it and its drive straight down the middle. He tossed the blade off to the side and went over to his own rifle and looked out at the dozens of other areas filled with Covenant forces. Hundreds of them. Each member of the Blue Team and the Doomslayer would have to kill at least 40 of them to clear it out, not to mention the demons that have the chance to spawn here as well. They stood no chance. Master Chief reloaded. Chapter 21. If you ever wanted to know the definition of scary in the year 2552, it was redefined, and now it was solidified. Scary was a Spartan with a loaded weapon. Frederick remained on the edge that he landed on with his rocket launcher laid against a rock as he faced the horde of Covenant force that came up from below in the tunnel that was dug into the side of the gorge's stone walls, in which the majority of the Covenant forces they now faced were encamped. Frederick was the first Spartan to kill a brute in hand-to-hand combat. Now it was his turn to rip and tear. Several jackals shot at him from his cover behind a destroyed chopper that he managed to take down with a well-timed grenade throw. Also, the fact that the driver was a very confused grunt didn't do anything to exactly make it that hard. Frederick held onto his assault rifle with both hands and let out a singular breath before aiming through the fire of the chopper and holding down the trigger of his rifle, flowing the path of the shots that were fired. 10 bullets tore through the face of one of the jackals and pierced through its skull and exited out the other side of its head. A brief pause as Frederick let his finger of the trigger and aimed it to the right just a bit more and letting loose another stream of bullets that shot through the chest of another jackal. Frederick moved out from his cover for a moment and mowed down 2 other grunts before going back behind the chopper as blasts of plasma hit the corner of the chopper which he stood at. He went over to the M41 and aimed down into the lower level of the gorge and launched another rocket into a jackal tower and killing 5 of them. He opened up the rocket chamber and put 2 more rockets into it before going back to the edge of the chopper and cutting down a brute with the rest of the clip before reloading the magazine as he took cover once more. He jumped on top of the chopper and shot 2 bursts into 2 of the advancing jackals and making the others back off with the rest of the clip. He jumped back down into cover and switched to his rocket launcher to blow up a Banshee before it took off and launching the second rocket into a Wraith to stop it from firing at his position. He opened up the chamber once more as he grabbed one of his last 2 rockets. A sound like thunder erupted from behind him, and as he turned he watched as the chopper went flying away. With the full rotation, he found a chieftain standing before him. The chieftain bounced his gravity hammer up and down in his hands as a crooked smile came across the chieftain's face. Frederick dropped the rocket launcher and looked up at the chieftain. Holding his second rocket in his right hand, he pulled back his right arm and shoulder and punched forward as he primed the rocket against his thigh. He slammed the end of the rocket into the chest of the chieftain and activated his armor lock a millisecond later. The chest of the chieftain exploded with the rocket's impact and sent the rest of it flying back towards the half-dozen brutes and roughly 10 jackals and grunts. The blade of the gravity hammer kept the hammer in place only 4 feet in front of Frederick. As he turned off the armor lock, he rolled his right shoulder as he picked up his rocket launcher and launched the singular rocket into the gorge before tossing the M41 over his shoulder and over the cliff. He walked forwards and kicked the head of the gravity hammer out of the ground while holding the handle. Frederick held it upright and bounced the handle up and down in his hands. The brutes roared and charged him. He returned the favor. A rocket exploded behind some Covenant cover and killed 3 jackals. Kelly jumped over the cover and fired her BR-55 twice into the heads of 2 grunts before jumped on top of some cover and running over it, while firing several times at an elite. The elite shot back at her before his shields broke and his skull was pierced. Kelly reloaded her rifle and took down 2 grunts and a jackal with a total of 4 pulls of the trigger. 3 elites stood near cover as they fired their pulse rifles at her. Only a few of the shots actually hitting her, for she did not remain still. She pulled out a grenade and threw it at the 3 elites to destroy their shields, and when they were down she pulled the trigger 3 more times to allow 3 more corpses to fall. She spun around while pulling out her magnum and fired 5 times into the head and chest of a jackal before putting away her magnum and reloading. A ghost flew over towards her and firing towards her. Kelly dashed behind a weapons rack and grabbed one of the plasma pistols. As the ghost circled around her, she let loose a full charge of the plasma pistol to short-circuit the ghost. She ran over to it with another charge and pointed the full charge at the grunt. "Don't kill me," the grunt pleaded. Kelly paused before shrugging and letting go of the trigger to remove the head of the grunt. With a kick, she removed its corpse from the seat and jumped in. With a check of the acceleration, she nodded and went full blast forward. 3 brutes remained crouched behind cover with 7 corpses of jackals and brutes surrounded them. The one in the front of the group let his eyes become exposed for a single moment to see if he could finally spot the Spartan, but only found a piece of metal going through the place right between his eyes and passing out the other side. His body hit the ground before the entirety of his shields broke. Linda remained lying down, surrounded by a small area of brush with a singular tree behind her. She removed her magazine and reloaded. She aimed at a jackal's nest and fired twice, and 2 more jackals hit the ground after falling out of the nest. 3 brutes approached the area in which she hid. "Burn it to the ground. Let the Spartan turn to ash," the head brute said. The brutes began to throw incendiary grenades into the green, which was soon ablaze. One brute began to laugh before a bullet passed out the back of his open mouth. Linda walked quickly towards the 3 of them and pelleted the trigger 2 more times. As she let the flames grow behind her, she quickly rotated her body and fired the last shot of her clip into the last 2 brutes that were behind the original cover as the 2 of them came out. The bullet passed through the front of the head of one, out the back, and into the front of the other, and the 2 of them hit the ground as she reloaded. Kelly swung around in front of her with the ghost and jumped out of it as Linda reloaded. "I followed the vapor trails," Kelly told her. "I surveyed the area as best I could. The main complex is roughly 4 clicks that way. Uploaded to the heads up." "Understood," Master Chief answered over the comms. "En route." Frederick said with a crash of the gravity hammer echoing. The link from the Doomslayer opened and closed. That was his version of a yes for the most part. How do you think he's doing? Kelly asked Linda. A massive explosion was heard towards the direction the Doomslayer landed. Do you need an answer? Chapter 22. The Doomslayer dragged off to his right a jackal by the neck. He found these things to be the most cathartic to kill out of all of the Covenant forces, as their bodies were very similar to that of imps. Both consciously and subconsciously, he had marked the different Covenant forces into their demonic counterparts. Jackal, imps, especially the ones that wielded plasma pistols, he almost forget to separate the names. The fact that one stands with a shield while the other evades is the only true way he separates them. Grunt, possessed soldiers, if the soldiers were much more cowardly, though those possessed are not allowed to be. Brute, the demons that he once learned was comically nicknamed by the U.A.C. Pinky, or possible Hell Knights. Personalities for the most part were very similar, get them pissed off, and they charge you. Brutes, however, are much easier to kill in his option. Elites, Hellraisers if they were bred with Hell Knights. He found the elite's sense of pride to be quite annoying. Kill the things that try to kill you. Hunters, Mancubus if they could move at a slightly greater pace. The Doomslayer, of course, went into a sort of lulled state when fighting these Covenant soldiers. They stood in formation against the formation of others. They do not fight erratically unless terrified, which for him and the Spartans were easily able to accomplish, which was several degrees easier to deal with than the unpredictability of demons. Put a few rounds into the chest of an elite, and they recoil and gather themselves. Blast a Hellraiser point blank into the chest with a shotgun, and they will grab at the gun while firing back at you. Throw a grenade at jackals, and they get out of the way of the explosion. Throw one at a group of imps, and they will leap at you. Kill 2 grunts in quick succession, and the rest panic. Rip the head off a Baron of Hell, and throw it at a group of possessed, and save if you hit one of them, none of them will slow in their attack or advance. So to him, for the most part, the enemies of the Covenant were quite boring. Even with their weapons that to him should be several hundred years in advancement, they were still lacking. He tossed the corpse of the jackal off to the side as fire and blood remained all around him, with 2 destroyed wraiths and 3 dozen Covenant forces being killed. He pulled out his Gauss cannon and took out a sniper of one of the stone ridges as they took aim at him. He put away the cannon and pulled out his assault rifle and counting how many more bullets he had left. Roughly half of all of his ammunition by what he could do. He closed the magazine and running forward. He kicked a grunt in the chest and knocked it into its back before blowing off its head and switching to rockets and launching them into 3 other grunts where they shortly exploded to leave massive holes in each of their chests. The Doomslayer didn't even look at them or wait for the explosions to go off before moving on. A ghost flew towards him at full speed while firing at him, with every other burst actually hitting him. This didn't even slow him. He reached into his warp pack and dropped a round device before jumping. The device displayed a full hologram of his body, which the pilot of the ghost continued to shoot at, not noticing that the Doomslayer had jumped until he landed on top of the ghost and pointed a charged pistol at the elite's face and letting it loose. With the elite's shields destroyed, the Doomslayer kicked him in the head out of the ghost's seat. The ghost stopped, and the Doomslayer pointed his double-barrel shotgun at the elite. The elite chuckled as it pushed himself off the ground and turned to the Doomslayer. "You are quite tricky, aren't you?" The elite said, looking down the barrel and outstretching its arms to either side of him. More Covenant forces came around and pointed their guns at the Doomslayer. The elite raised up one hand to them to keep them from firing. "With your little toys. Pull that trigger. Without it, you would never be able to challenge one of us." The Doomslayer looked at him for a moment and shook his head slightly and put away his double barrel and hoped down from the ghost in front of the elite. The foot of height difference forcing one to looking up and the other 2 looked down considerably. The side of the elite's mouth twitched upwards in a smirk as the Doomslayer pulled back his right fist. With a blur, the Doomslayer planted his fist into the elite's stomach, bending the metal of the elite's armor with the bunch. Saliva and bile left the elite's mouth with a gasp of pain before falling to his knees with both arms wrapping themselves around his stomach. The Doomslayer punched him across the face with both of his fists once, the jaw of the elite cracking and breaking each time. The Doomslayer grabbed the chin of the elite and pulled back his head before slamming it over and over again into the skull of the elite. Fractures erupted from each impact, leaving the elite with many, many concussions. The Doomslayer shoved his finger from both hands into the skull of the elite from where the impact was. The elite, with what was left in him, reached up and grabbed the forearms of the Doomslayer. "Fuck!" The Doomslayer growled just loud enough that every Covenant soldier close by heard his voice. "Your honor." He ripped the elite's skull in half and turned back to rest of the Covenant nearby as he reached into his warp pack and pulled out his pump-action shotgun and ran towards them. Half of the Covenant began to run away, not only the grunts, but also the jackals, while the rest fired at him. He launched a grenade from his shotgun into 2 brutes before firing 3 times into both of them as a cloaked elite ran at him from behind with its plasma sword. The Doomslayer turned sharply while pulling out his chainsaw and cut the elite in half as he turned. The plasma sword stuck out of the ground as the elite became visible. A brute ran at him with 2 maulers. The Doomslayer grabbed the plasma sword and ran at the brute and shoved it through the brute's chest and took the maulers for himself as another brute came at him. From each mauler, he fired 3 times into the brute to shred its face before firing the rest from one of the mauler into an elite to destroy its shields. The elite rushed him with a plasma sword, and he pulled out the last one from the brute's chest to block the attack. The elite pushed down at him with their plasma swords pushing back against each other. With his free hand, the Doomslayer unloaded the rest of the mauler into the abdomen of the elite, practically cutting the elite in half. The Doomslayer grabbed the other plasma sword and dropped it into his warp pack before running at a brute and beheading them. A chopper roared towards him where he threw the plasma sword into it to cut through a good portion of the vehicle before pulling out the other and jumping at the chopper, stabbing into it. The driver's eyes widened with fear as the Doomslayer slashed away at his body, cutting him into 3 parts. The Doomslayer's shoulders rose and fell as he stood covered in the driver's blood in the wreckage of the chopper. Why couldn't they all just die? Why can't he just kill them all? All their stupid fucking pride and honor? Just stay out of his way. Footsteps from his right made him pull out his double barrel and point at the figure with one hand. Friendly. Master Chief said firmly before he got his head blown off. You kinda got ballistic there. Are you going to be alright? The Doomslayer threw the handle of the plasma sword off to the side as his breathing once again slowed. He shook his head a few times before looking back at Master Chief and giving a singular slow nod. Master Chief nodded back and picked up a fallen pulse rifle and disregarding his old one. Doomslayer leaned against one of destroyed pieces of the chopper and looked at the chief. Vega, how much further till we reach the opening? Another mile at the most. Though I do believe when you get within half of a mile of the opening you will encounter demonic resistance as well. Vega answered. How much? Approximately 35% the number of force you have currently faced within the past 3 hours if I am not miscalculating. Vega told him, though it is highly likely that whatever number you deplete they will regain from hell. How much is that? Master Chief asked. Between 6 and 13 dimensions from most of our estimates. Vega replied. With the 63% demonic turn rate that we know and the average population being 50 billion from when they merged different plans, I can assume 300 billion would be Hell's population. With the 7 different layers of Hell each would have rounded 42.86 billion per layer. Did I hear that right? Kelly asked over the comms. 300 billion demons. If we assume that only 10 dimensions have been taken over by Hell. Vega answered. That is what we are facing. That's just not fair. She replied. Never is. Master Chief answered. It doesn't matter as long as we close that opening. I'm sending a waypoint to all your heads-up displays. Meet Doomslayer and I there in 10 minutes. With that, he turned off the comms and looked to the Doomslayer as he rocked the head of a dead grunt back and forth with his foot. So that's what you have been fighting? The Doomslayer looked over at him and gave 2 slow nods before pushing himself back to his feet and checking the pump on his shotgun. The 2 super soldiers looked at each other in silence as the sounds of explosions and gunshots echoes and repeated all around them. Master Chief's shields fully came back as he rolled his fingers under the barrel of the pulse rifle he now used. He looked at Doomslayer's shotgun and thought about the massive amount of ammunition that it carried within it. The reason that he had to have such large magazines was the same reason the Spartan had to constantly pick up new guns. A thought went through his mind. What would happen if the 2 of them fought? The Master Chief versus the Doomslayer. He began to run comparisons through his head. Predator suit versus Mjolnir V. The Doomslayer's endless personal arsenal versus the countless weapons that Master Chief was skilled at. One's endless luck against the other's boundless rage. Without even realizing it, the Master Chief had put one foot behind the other as to take up a better fighting stance against the Doomslayer. The Doomslayer must have knew something like that was going through the 1,000 pounds of Spartan in front of him, for he just shrugged and turned away before heading back towards the opening. It was almost time for Hell to welcome back its fear. Chapter 23. An elite captain rushed into his general's building of operation and fell to a knee and lowered his head. The air crackling and bubbling as the tear that poured the demon hordes of Hell remained active. The air was near toxic and at best nauseating, with the smell of brimstone and decaying flesh and the undeniable smell of metallic blood being a constant assault on one's senses. Ironically, the only members of the Covenant force that did not have any issue with the air was in fact the grunts, as they mostly breathed a different form of gas than the rest. The elite captain's shield, to this degree, were active as he remained kneeling on the now stone-like floor. In fact, the entire building was altered into a hellish form. Flesh like stone creeped and overtook the material that the building was originally comprised of, with fissures of pulsing energy running like veins against this hellish landscape. The elite captain had seen similar stone appearing and overtaking other structures near the portal to Hell, sometimes just making twisted pillars of the material, but it was more prominent here than anywhere else. The Covenant were ordered by their general to bring all corpses near to the portal, where they watched in horror as the bodies were infected by the Hell energy, whereas they would rise again possessed and shambling. Some of the material began to creep over the elite's hand, and he pulled it away and gulped. Sir, the Spartans and the Doomslayer are coming. They are only 2 kilometers out at the greatest. Shall we send out the hordes to meet them? The captain asked. The general emerged out from the shadows, and the captain could not recognize him, blinking his eyes again and again at the figure. The flaps that were once the general's mouth had all been sealed with a hellish metal-like growth. Horns made of similar growth came out of the side of the general's head and pointed forward. Plate-like growths came off right arm and over his hand over the handle of his plasma sword, with his other arm being taken over partially, as able to hold things normally. More growths came out from all over his body to form a sort of plate armor over his torso and legs comprised of what was once his elite armor and these hellish metal growths. Spike emerging out of the armor just as well. The general had also growth 2 more feet in height, putting him over 10 feet tall. The general looked down at the elite as he quivered. I do not need you to send such a message. A voice came from nearly all around, a true source non-existent. If I want it, they will go with a mere thought. You are so primitive that you need to send out orders in such a way. Here we thought that your weapons and armor proved you were more advanced than such. What has happened to you? The deal that you struck. The being said, looking over his right hand and having the plasma blade coming out in a blood red before looking over his left. Are you unsatisfied? The elite captain jumped back away from the figure and turned on his own. The deal was that our forces would combine to destroy the humans. The elite yelled. A rumble came from around the elite's head. Laughter. Is this not but the purest form of combination? The figure replied. The elite swung his plasma sword at the figure and caught the blade in his left hand against the growths in its palm. Primitive as you may be, your kind still knows the value of blades, at least to a degree. Holding onto the blade, the being yanked the plasma sword out of the elite's hand, tossing it to the side and grabbing the elite by the throat. The figure easily lifted the elite and slammed the elite head first into the wall, just with enough force not to kill the elite. Deals, promises, compromises. No wonder you have lost to mortal men. A dozen times over you could have defeated humanity. But no, you failed. Not because of these mock mimics of the Doomslayer you called Spartans, but because you let them. The figure slammed him again into the wall, bending the steel. You wipe out a planet of them, but then you claim a singular one of them is the end of you? Pathetic. When your drive was to kill, to wipe out, to destroy, this is when you were strong. How could you have forgotten such values? The figure thrusted his plasma blade into the elite's chest and dropped the corpse to the floor before walking out to be met by 2 barons of hell and 2 possessed hunters. With nothing but a hand gesture, the 4 of them went out towards where the Spartans and Doomslayer were coming from. The figure walked forward a bit before turning back and watching as a possessed, shambling elite came out from the building. The possessed elite nodded and followed the rest of the forces, with the figure walking behind a good majority of the force. He was Hell Incarnate, and he was ready to rip the Doomslayer apart. Blue team arrived at slightly sloping section of the cannon that was for the slowest of them 15 minutes away from the portal. Demons and possessed Covenant came at them in groups of 30 at the most, but against 4 Spartans and the Doomslayer, they never stood a chance. Linda looked down the scope of her rifle at a group of Covenant structures and watched as hellish stone overtook them slowly. Off to the side, she heard as another demon got its head ripped off by the Doomslayer, while Master Chief continued to shoot down possessed with a pulse rifle. Frederick and Kelly took up her flanks so she could scout out ahead without any issue. You know what this is, Vega? She asked. The AI jumped into her helmet to see what she was talking about. Oh, that's an effect that happens when a large amount of Argent energy is exposed. The energy begins to solidifies and transforms the landscape into a hellish one. It only happened close to the portal on Mars. But here it looks as if the Covenant has actually been using their entire ability to rip it open. Vega answered. How fast spreading is it? It has a square inverse connection by all likelihood. Larger the portal, faster the growth. When this planet is overtaken, Argent energy will seep through the void of space into the rest of the solar system. So forth and so on till the galaxy is taken over. After that, even the rate of growth would take the fastest pace would take well over 400,000 years. Well then, let's head down this path, Linda said while marking different paths on her waypoint map before rumbling came from the very air around them. Kill them. A voice called out around them. A blast from a wraith was launched at them from overhead. The eyes of Blue Team locked onto the threat and took action that second, dashing out of the way. The team was thrown in each direction with a combination of the 5 of them dodging out of the way and the explosion. The Doomslayer's head pivoted and looked directly down the slope and found the Incarnate standing at the base with a single finger pointed at their position as a horde of demons rushed towards the team. Imps rushed down from the side of the cannon as they leaped against the stone and throwing balls of Argent energy at the group. Possessed Covenant fumbled forward while firing what weapons that had been infused with their bodies at the team. Barons and Knights ran together at the 5 of them, while Mencubi launched projectile from the opposite side of the canyon at the group. While returning fire, Blue Team moved out of the path of different attacks from the demon horde, strafing as they fired what little ammo they had left, with one of them remaining still. The Doomslayer. Master Chief looked at him as he remained still out of the corner of his eye and watched as a sort of purple light began to overtake the Doomslayer's body. The Doomslayer rolled his shoulders and pulled out his assault rifle. He rolled his neck and ran forward directly towards the Incarnate. "Move on, Doomslayer," Master Chief called out. "No." The Incarnate lifted up his left hand, and the rock of the canyon floor began to split between the blue team and the Doomslayer before stalagmite-like rocks erupted out of the fissure to create a 20-foot wall between them. The Doomslayer looked at the wall of the corner of his eye for a moment before aiming at a revenant in the air and ripping it apart with a riddle of bullets, while running forward while the purple glow continued to emanate from his body. He ran forward and spun his body while stepping forward and back-fisted off the head of a possessed grunt. A knight charged at him from the side and launched 2 rockets into its head and torso before jumping over it as it exploded. When he landed, he let loose 30 more shots into 20 possessed, imps, and razors. He let his rifle fall into his warp pack as a baron charged at him while a possessed hunter came from the side. While sliding, he pulled out his Gauss's cannon and blew a hole out from the chest of the baron and coming out the other side of its legs. The hunter leaped over the corpse of the baron, and the Doomslayer dropped a hologram of himself and dashed off to the side while charging another shot. As the hunter attacked the hologram, he destroyed its back with a blast so powerful it cut the hunter in half. He pulled out his double barrel and took down an imp as it leapt through the air while jumping out of the way of a rocket from a revenant. With his jets, he double jumped at the revenant and blew its head off and switched to his plasma rifle as the summoner that brought forth the imp warped away. He ran at it while mowing down another razor before stunning the summoner. With a sweep of the legs and a punch, the Doomslayer crushed the demon's skull into the stone floor. A pinky charged at him, and he jumped over it while blasting away at its back before throwing a grenade at a group of possessed jackals and imps. Both died within seconds of each other. Landing, he was slammed into by a baron of hell and thrown back 20 feet. Feet scrapping against the stone, he remained crouched as a mancubus took aim at him from the side, and a hell knight came from the other. As he got to his feet, he pulled out his double-barrel shotgun and blasted the hell knight that held to its knees. The Doomslayer ran at it and jumped at it, feet first, his legs going past the demon's head as he hooked its head with an arm. Bone and brain matter became paste as they were driven into the stone. The Baron of Hell came at him once more, and the Doomslayer pulled out his chainsaw and cut off a leg before decapitating the demon. The Doomslayer sprinted at the mancubus with the chainsaw and powered through the blast it hit him with, dragging the ripping teeth of the chainsaw across the stomach of the mancubus. Blood and a strange blue energy covered the Doomslayer. The Doomslayer stood up and pulled out his pump-action shotgun. Master Chief remained silent as he saw the last 3 kills by the Doomslayer for himself. "I'm not going to fight that." Chapter 24. The Incarnate stood 4 feet towering over the Doomslayer as he walked towards it with shotgun in hand. For hundreds of years, Hell quivered at the mere mention of the Doomslayer's name, the fear driving the endless hordes of Hell deeper into their realms. The armor that it wore, after all, had the uncanny ability to absorb the essence of fallen demons into the wearer's own system to heal from wounds, allowed it to survive countless battles. Lack of ammunition meant little to it as well, for it would simply rip and tear apart with its own bare hands. It was equal to immortality as any legend before told. Dimensions of desperate fools scrapped and scrambled to survive against Hell's existence. That was not the Doomslayer's objective. Its objective was not to run, not to survive, not to see the next day. No, its purpose was to kill. A traumatic event caused by a pool of endless rage and grit birthed by a failure. It is what keeps Hell from going forward. The mountains of corpses that it has left in its wake, fallen temples and cities, Titans slew as if they were common mortals. Some of its battles have still left scars on Hell's very landscape centuries after they had been initially fought. Legends and tales have been formed by demons that managed to escape its rage after first seeing it, some becoming teachers to others about how it fights and how to avoid it. Now the Incarnate stood before the Doomslayer and wasn't afraid. That sensation would not be allowed, not here, not now. The Incarnate felt his face turn into a twisted smirk as it shifted its weight as the Doomslayer picked up speed towards him. The Doomslayer launched an explosive from his shotgun at the Incarnate, lifted up its left hand, and the explosive detonated on his palm with a sensation of a hard high five. He swung his right arm, and a slash of argent energy flew out towards the Doomslayer, colliding with its chest and sending it flying backwards. The Incarnate jetting up his left hand, and a stalagmite of stone jetted up out of the stone floor of the valley. The Doomslayer's back slammed into it. The Incarnate ran at the Doomslayer with speed twice as fast and slammed the bottom of its foot into the Doomslayer, launching the Doomslayer through the stalagmite with a crash and a scrap. The Doomslayer landed on its side, but did not lose eye contact with the Incarnate. "I know you, Doomslayer." The Incarnate spoke. "Speed is what allows you slaughter, so I shall make such impossible." The Incarnate lifted up his left hand again, and the stalagmite rose up with the motion and pointed itself at the downed Doomslayer. With a thrusting motion of his hand, the stalagmite launched forward at the Doomslayer, impaling the stone floor and exploding just as the Doomslayer rolled away from the attack. Another raise of Incarnate's hand and more stalagmites formed. The Doomslayer pulled out his assault rifle as he ran in an arch around the Incarnate, bullets bouncing off his plates like pellets against steel. Another slash of energy launched towards the Doomslayer. The Doomslayer jumped forward to dodge, and the Incarnate smirked. The Incarnate created a distortion in front of the Doomslayer's path, and when he was caught inside of it, he was within a bubble controlled by the Incarnate. With another motion of his hand, he threw the Doomslayer back into the path of the slash, and sending the Doomslayer slamming into another stalagmite. The Incarnate broke off 3 stalagmites with his telekinesis and launching them at the Doomslayer, who launched mini-rockets into them to cause them to explode into dust. As the dust settled, a hand wrapped around the Doomslayer's chest before lifting him up. The Incarnate smiled as he pulled back his right arm and blade as he kept hold of the Doomslayer. The Doomslayer pointed the assault rifle at Incarnate's face and launched the remaining rockets into his face. The explosion stunned him enough to allow Doomslayer to put a siphon grenade on top of Incarnate's arm. As the siphon worked away, Doomslayer slammed his knee into the underside of his arm to make him let go before running behind Incarnate and firing into his back with his pulse rifle. Incarnate spun around rapidly with a slash, cutting a gauge through the stone to be formed as the Doomslayer jumped back while switching to his rock launcher. While running backwards, the Doomslayer launched 5 rockets into the body of Incarnate. The Incarnate dashed forward with speed unknown to any other demon and clammed his left hand around the end of the rocket launcher, causing the last launched one to detonate inside of the barrel, bending and breaking the barrel of the launcher. Your advantage of speed does not exist here. The Incarnate ripped the launcher out Doomslayer's hand and swung it into Doomslayer's side and sent him flying into the wall of stone previously created. The Incarnate launched another slash at the Doomslayer, who ducked out of its path and dodging another force bubble created by the Incarnate. He pulled out his pulse rifle and let loose a barrage at the Incarnate, who shrugged it off as he rushed the Doomslayer again as he strafed. Once he got close enough, the Doomslayer let loose the stun blast from his pulse rifle. This would only stun the Incarnate for a millisecond. That much Doomslayer could tell, but it was enough. Doomslayer jumped up onto the bent knee of Incarnate and jumped again up to his body was level with Incarnate's head. With a boost from his boot, Doomslayer slammed his foot into the side Incarnate's head. Incarnate's body stumbled for a second while Doomslayer grabbed one of his horn and pressing the end of the pulse rifle between Incarnate faceplate and holding the trigger down for a second. Incarnate grabbed Doomslayer once more and threw him 30 feet behind him, crashing into the stone. Incarnate blinked a few times before rushing forward just behind another slash as he created a semicircle behind Doomslayer of stalagmites. Doomslayer rushed forward uncaring of his position, and Incarnate smiled. As the slash connected with Doomslayer, Incarnate looked past it and saw the Doomslayer pointing his Gauss cannon at his face. The slash and Incarnate passed through the hologram just as a beam collided with Incarnate's face. Incarnate stumbled back, and the Doomslayer pulled out his chainsaw and swung it at Incarnate's knee. The teeth of the chainsaw connected, and the chain broke. Incarnate slammed his leg forward and pinned Doomslayer under his knee while pulling back his blade. "You are out of tricks," Incarnate yelled as the Doomslayer pulled out his pistol and began shooting it in his face, the blasts bouncing off the plating. "What good is that?" 1,000 pounds of metal slammed into Incarnate's head and knocked him backwards. Master Chief landed next to Doomslayer while the rest of Blue Team quickly came up behind. Incarnate grabbed his head and shook it as a barrage of assault rifle rounds pelted his side from Frederick. Master Chief held down his hand to Doomslayer, who took the hand and was pulled to his feet. Frederick pushed from the side. Kelly rushed the front. "Linda, keep that blade suppressed," Master Chief called out. "VGA, give me a medical read on Doomslayer." "1 moment," VGA replied. 8 broken ribs, internal bleeding, ruptured spleen, severe damage to stomach, liver, right kidney, torn torso muscles. Wounds comparable to a car crash. Overall current effectiveness estimated at 42%. "Stay down, Doomslayer, we got this," Master Chief said. The Doomslayer threw his arm to the side and tried to run forward, but Master Chief stopped him. "Are you insane? By all accounts, you should be strapped down to a medical table." Doomslayer stared at Master Chief in silence with a hidden expression of annoyance behind the glass of his helmet. Doomslayer pulled out his double-barrel shotgun and stepped around Master Chief's arm and ran at the Incarnate. "How tough is that guy?" Master Chief asked himself as he ran behind the Doomslayer. Another sniper round found itself bouncing off the plate at the base of Incarnate's blade. Incarnate created a row of stalagmites that was meant to impale Frederick, but the Spartan dodged out of the way, while Kelly shot her DMR into the chest of Incarnate to very little effect. Frederick threw a grenade at Incarnate, but it was caught in a telekinesis bubble and thrown over at Linda. Linda kicked the grenade away before it exploded. While she was distracted, a stalagmite shot out from behind her. The stalagmite slammed into the small of her back, breaking her shields and throwing her 5 feet off to the side. Incarnate swung his blade, and another slash went flying forward, breaking down the row of stalagmites towards Frederick, who was forced to jump out of the way. Kelly continued to fire away at Incarnate, who was now just getting annoyed. The plates covered his mouth opened up with a hellish glow before a column of fire erupted out and hitting Kelly. Her shielding broke away and she felt the layers of titanium heating up by several hundred degrees. It would only be a second before she began to boil. Half a clip of assault fire buried itself into the face of Incarnate as Master Chief advanced forward, this causing Incarnate to stop breathing fire. The Doomslayer jumped over Kelly and through the flames as he sprinted at the knee of Incarnate. He shot both barrels into the knee of Incarnate twice before he dodged out of the way of a kick. Frederick followed up with his own shotgun as he aimed at the elbow of Incarnate. A pillar of stone shot out from the ground and knocked Frederick away before Incarnate was drawn towards the firing of Linda's sniper rifle. Incarnate slashed at her, and as the energy blade traveled forward, Linda put her sniper rifle on her back as she pulled out a pistol. She fired rapidly as he walked sideways. Incarnate held up his left hand and created a bubble that collected most of the fired bullets fired by both Linda and Master Chief before throwing all of the ammunition back at them. Master Chief's shields waned partially while Linda dived out of their paths. Doomslayer fired his pump-action shotgun while going towards Frederick. "The guy's big," Frederick said while the two gathered up. He looked Doomslayer in the face. "Let's knock him down." Doomslayer nodded and jerked his head to the left. "Got it," Frederick replied and ran at the right leg of Incarnate while tossing his shotgun to Master Chief. While Incarnate was distracted by the barrage of fire from Kelly, Chief, and Linda, Doomslayer got behind Incarnate's left leg while Frederick got behind the right. They then wrapped their arms as best they could around Incarnate's legs and lifted upwards, straining against the thousands and thousands of pounds of demonic flesh and metal above them. They rose up straight with Incarnate, now lifted a foot off the ground and leaned backwards together. Incarnate's body crashed back into the stone and into a few stalagmites that he had created. He grunted out of annoyance before Master Chief jumped up onto his chest and slammed his boot into Incarnate's faceplates to keep his mouth shut as he unloaded the full clip of the shotgun point-blank into Incarnate's chest. Incarnate slammed his forearm into Master Chief's chest and sent him flying back 10 feet. Kelly jumped up into his path and caught Master Chief. Incarnate got back to his feet and let a massive slash that covered his arm's reach. Blue team ducked or dodged out of the way as he roared. "Enough of your fucking bullshit," he yelled at them as a wall of dust rose up from his slash. He swiped his left hand to cause a sweep of force to push away all the dust and stared at Doomslayer as he unloaded his chain gun into Incarnate's chest, the bullets bouncing off the majority of the plating. A rocket was launched by Frederick at Incarnate, which was caught inside a telekinesis bubble. "What is that supposed to do?" Master Chief answered by jumping off a large boulder as he held the BFG in his hands, the glowing green energy charging up inside the barrel. Incarnate's mouth opened wide and charged up to blast Master Chief away, but all it did was give an opening. The ball of energy got into Incarnate's face with a mighty explosion that sent Master Chief flying over next to the Doomslayer. Another cloud of dust covered Incarnate as Master Chief was helped to his feet by Doomslayer. "This is kind of fun," Chief said, holding up the BFG with one hand. Doomslayer held out his palm. Master Chief almost seemed to roll his eyes as he handed it back to Doomslayer and watched it as it vanished into his warp pack. "Hoo-hoo," Incarnate gasped as the dust settled. All the plating from his upper torso and face had been blown off and his skin was singed, and one of his eyes was now nothing but a burnt-out socket. His blade was now flickering, and he was holding himself up on one knee. His one eye latched onto the Doomslayer. "Why, no matter where, no matter when, every time we rise you come. Across time and space you appear. We feared killing you for the fear of your immortal soul, but now I see it was a mistake. What are you to never perish? What are you to deny us? Who in the living fuck do you think you are?" Doomslayer walked forward ahead of Blue Team up to the pointing finger of Incarnate with his double-barrel shotgun in one hand pointing down at his side. The rest of Blue Team pointed their guns at the head of Incarnate as his own gun pointed down at the stone floor of the canyon. He looked back at Master Chief and the rest of them for a moment before turning back to Incarnate. Doomslayer remained silent, and then he shrugged and pressed the end of the shotgun into Incarnate's forehead. Incarnate blinked. "Shit." Boom.